sa ating bansa ang bagyo, pagputok ng bulkan, paglindol, sunog at kung ano-ano pang kalamidad. Ito ay hindi natin maiiwasan, pero maaari natin itong paghandaan. Bilang kasagutan, ating binuo ang Project DINA o Disaster Information for Nationwide Awareness. Sa tulong ng iba't ibang ahensya ng pamahalaan, layunin nito na magbigay ng sapat na kaalaman tungkol dito at kung ano ang dapat gawin para mapaghandaan ang mga kalamidad. Halina at magkaisa. Tandaan, kung bawat isa ay laging handa, tiyak ang kaligtasan ng ating pamilya at ng ating komunidad. Handa na ba kayo?
Ang tsunami ay ang sunod-sunod na alon sa dagat na likha ng lindol na ang episentro ay nasa ilalim ng dagat. Nabubuo ito kapag mababaw ang pinagbulan ng lindol at kapag may sapat na lakas itong pagalawin ang sahig ng dagat at ang tubig sa ibabaw nito. Maaari ring magkaroon ng tsunami kung may landslide sa ilalim ng dagat, kung pumutok ang bulkang malapit sa dagat o sa ilalim nito, at kung may bumagsak na bulalakaw sa karagatan. Ang tsunami ay may bilis na 800 kilometers per hour sa malalim na parte ng karagatan. Ngunit ang alon nito ay mababa lamang at pwede itong bumagal ng 40 hanggang 80 kilometro per hour sa dalampasigan. Maaring tumaas ang alon nito sa 10 metro o higit pa, sing taas ng bahay na may 3 palapag.
Para maibsan ang epekto ng tsunami, magtanim ng mga puno at bakawan sa tabing dagat. Magkabit ng mga karatula malapit sa dagat na naghahatid ng babala at paalala ukol sa tsunami. Maglagay ng karatulang Tsunami Hazard Zone sa mga lugar na maaaring tamaan ito. Tiyakin ding mayroong directional signs patungo sa mga ligtas na lugar o evacuation sites. Siguraduhin maluwag at ligtas ang mga daang papunta sa mga ito. Bumuo ng tsunami evacuation plan at magsagawa ng tsunami evacuation drill sa inyong komunidad. Sa pagdating ng tsunami, patunugin ang mga batingaw o alarm para bigyang babala ang mga residente. May 3 natural na senyales kung may padating na lokal na tsunami. Una, lindol na may sapat na lakas para maramdaman ito. Ikalawa, ang biglaang pagbaba o pagtaas ng antas ng tubig dagat. Kakaiba ito sa normal na low tide o high tide. At pangatlo, dagundong ng papalapit na tsunami. Pinapayuhan namang manatili sa malalim na parte ng dagat ang mga pumalaot habang may tsunami. Dapat nilang hintayin ang go signal bago bumalik sa dalampasigan. Pagkatapos ng lindol, tumungo sa mataas na lugar, dala-dala ang emergency survival bag. Sa evacuation area, mag-head count at suriin ang sarili at inyong mga kasama.
Ang tsunami ay lubhang mapanganib. Kaya nitong tangayin ang mga bangka, malalaking bato at iba pang malalaki at mabibigat na bagay. Ngunit ang simpleng pakikisa at pagsunod sa mga patnubay ay mahahalagang hakbang upang maproteksyonan ang sarili at ang inyong pamilya. Tamang kaalaman ay kahandaan, maging ligtas, maging panatag, Pilipinas.
Maging panatag, Pilipinas.
Ang landslide o pagguho ng lupa ay maaari maganap anumang oras dahil sa pagulan at paglindol. Karaniwan itong nangyayari sa mga matataas at matatarik na lugar, lalo na kung ito'y mayroong malambot na lupa. Ito man ay mabilis na kaganapan at kadalas ay walang babala. May mga palatandaan naman sa ating kapaligiran na maaari nating obserbahan. Ilan sa mga senyales ng landslide ay pagkakaroon ng mga bitak sa lupa, pagtabingi ng mga puno, poste at bakod, biglaang pagbukal ng tubig sa lupa, pagkabutas ng mga linya ng tubig, pagkukulay putik ng ilog at mga bitak sa dingding, window frame, sahig at kalsada. At kapag nakarinig ng mga dagundong na maaring tumutukoy sa pagkaputo ng mga puno at nag-uumpog ang mga bato, hudyat na ito ng pagguho ng lupa. Upang maibsan ang mga panganib na hatid ng landslide,
huwag magtayo ng bahay o anumang struktura sa mga lugar na matatarik, malapit sa paanan ng bundok,
at malalambot na lupa at sa lugar na may mga history ng pagguho kagaya ng debris flow, debris avalanche, slump, mud flow, rockfall at iba pa.
alamin ang emergency at evacuation plan sa inyong lugar at siguraduhin pag-usapan ito kasama ang pamilya. Sa oras ng malakas na pag-ulan o bagyo, maging alerto upang maobserbahan ang inyong kapaligiran sa mga senyales ng landslide. Lumikas kung kinakailangan at gawin ito sa madaling panahon, dala-dala ang inyong emergency survival kit. Habang nagkakaroon ng pagguho ng lupa at ikay nasa loob ng gusali at hindi makalikas, manatili na lamang sa loob at magtago sa ilalim ng mesa o sa matitibay na parte ng kabahayan. Kung ikaw naman ay nasa labas, iwasan ang maring daanan ng landslide at magtungo sa ligtas na lugar. Kung malapit sa estero o ilog, maging alerto sa posibilidad ng biglaang pagtaas ng tubig. Ang biglang pagbaba mula sa normal na level ng tubig ay maaaring senyales ng pagbara sa may taas na bahagi ng ilog dahil sa landslide at posibleng pagkakaroon ng flash flood o debris flow. Kung ikaw naman ay nagmamaneho, maging mapamatsyag sa mga bumabagsak na semento, rumaragasang putik at mga nalalaglag na bato. At huwag tumawid sa mga tulay. Lumayo sa lugar ng pagguho hanggat sabihin ng mga lokal na opisyal na ligtas nang bumalik. Pagbalik ng tahanan, suriin ang pundasyon ng inyong bahay, linya ng tubig, mga poste ng kuryente, at ang inyong kapaligiran para sa anumang pagkasirang maaring naganap at ipaalam ito sa kinaukulan kung kinakailangan. Ipagbigay alam din sa mga kinaukulan kung may mga nasaktan at nawawalang tao. Subaybayan ang mga latest advisory mula sa telebisyon, radyo, social networking sites, at lokal na opisyal ng pamahalaan.
ang pagbaba ng mga bato, lupa at putik mula sa mataas na lugar ay sanhi ng gravity o ang hila ng natural na magneto ng daigdig. Maaari din itong rain-induced o yung dulot ng malakas na pagulan o kaya naman ay dahil sa mahina hanggang sa katamtamang pagulan na tumatagal ng hanggang 5 araw o higit pa. Ang landslide ay mapaminsala sa ating kabuhayan at ari-arian kung kaya't ito'y nararapat lamang na pinaghahandaan.
Di na bago sa ating bansa ang bagyo, pagputok ng bulkan, paglindol, sunog at kung ano-ano pang kalamidad. Ito ay hindi natin maiiwasan, pero maaari natin itong paghandaan. Bilang kasagutan, ating binuo ang Project DINA o Disaster Information for Nationwide Awareness. Sa tulong ng iba't ibang ahensya ng pamahalaan, layunin nito na magbigay ng sapat na kaalaman tungkol dito at kung ano ang dapat gawin para mapaghandaan ang mga kalamidad. Halina at magkaisa. Tandaan, kung bawat isa ay laging handa, tiyak ang kaligtasan ng ating pamilya at ng ating komunidad. Handa na ba kayo?
Anumang oras, dapat may nakahandang emergency survival kit na madaling bitbitin kung sakaling nagkaroon ng sakuna at kailangan ng lumikas ng tahanan. Dapat laman nito ang mga sumusunod.
First aid kit na nagalaman ng mga gamot para sa lagnat, LBM, sugat at iba pa. Flashlight, kandila, posporo, baterya at pito. Radyo at baterya. Inubing tubig sa saradong lalagyan. Mga kailangan ng mga sanggol, matatanda at may kapansanan. Ready to eat na pagkain na maaaring tumagal ng 2 araw. Kumot, malinis na damit, kapote, bota, tsinelas, tissue at sanitary supplies. Lubid, dyaryo, at matibay na lalagyan ng mga mahalagang bagay. Pera, papel at ballpen. At identification card o ID na nagalaman ng blood type at emergency contact number.
Thank you for joining our Zoom conference. We will begin shortly.
Let us begin the day with a prayer, which will be followed by the Philippine National Anthem, the Lupang Hinirang.
Our ever-loving Father, the core of every reason, the source of truth. You who made the earth and the heavens are the ultimate goal of every knowledge seekers, the infinite wisdom, the cause of all that is good. We are truly grateful for this opportunity to gather together as a community despite the challenges we face each day. Yet you remained and gave us strength to carry on the responsibilities of bearing intelligence and using them for better purposes. We now humbly ask you to join us in our endeavor to explore the wonders of life in the world for knowledge's sake, that in whatever we learn today, we become more grounded to you, who is truth, who is love. We pray that you bless our speakers, the fount of your infinite knowledge, that they can share something worthwhile despite the limited time we have. They can channel all they know and share to us the beauty and truth of living as your child. We pray that you guide our participants, the seekers of your boundless knowledge, that they may continue to persevere in the search and be deemed worthy to share what they learn from today's session. Sanctify us, O Lord, not because we are worthy of it, but because we believe in your love and mercy, that at the end of the day, we can take home something that's amazing and meaningful. This we ask and pray through Christ our Lord. Amen.
Mga kababayan, ang pambansang awit ng Pilipinas. Kayang magiliw, pero sa silanganan, alam ng puso, sa liit mo'y buhay. Lupang hinirang, kuya ka ng mahiting, sa manlulupin, di ka pasisigil, sa nagatang tulog sa simoy at sa langit ang bangaw, ay hinatang tulang awit sa pagkayang minamahal. Ang isang ng matawad mo'y tagumpay na nag-iinit, bakit tuwing at araw niya kailan pa may iwag-ibig. Luman ang araw ng walhagit pagsinta, buhay langit sa piling mo. Aming higaya na pagkay ang amin, ang mamatay ng dahil sa'yo.
Welcome to the second series and the last day of our learning event, still on earthquake safety information dissemination, construction law and standards, in collaboration with the Department of Science and Technology, Philippine Institute of Volcanology and Seismology or DOST PHIVOLCS. Mabuhay! Maayong buntag sa tanan, maupay nga aga haiyong nga tanan, and good morning to each and every one of us present here this morning. Again, we are your moderators on this learning event. My name is Rog from the Catholic Relief Services with my partner.
My name is Marel. I am from the CRS Philippines Manila office.
Last week, we finished the first series and we discussed about non-structural and unstructural mitigation measures with speakers from the DOST PHIVOLCS, the Association of Structural Engineers of the Philippines, Miyamoto International, and of course, CRS.
This morning, we will be joined by the Republic of Public Works and Highways and once again by the DOST PHIVOLCS. They will provide us with standards and guidelines on how to build a strong structure and assess already built structures based on its typology. Our second series is called Construction Laws and Standards. But before we begin our event, konting refresher po sa ating house rules. Number one, we would like to request all participants to be on mute mode all throughout the session para po magkarinigan tayo. Ikalawa, let us participate. Please click on the link to the menti.com. We will be using the Mentimeter to ask our resource persons questions, and participate in today's activity. The third one is that this event will be live streamed on YouTube via Facebook. So please feel free to share to your friends, to your colleagues, and anybody who might be interested. So maybe, partner, we can start with knowing how they feel today.
Yes, partner. So at this point, let's find out first kung ano ang ating mga inaasahang matututunan sa last day ng ating learning event. We would like to know how you are feeling para naman maset natin ang tamang mood sa magiging flow ng ating gawain this morning. Ating mga expectations sa topics, sa ating resource persons, facilitators, and the methodology o pamamaraan ng pagsasagawa nito. So pumunta po tayo sa menti.com, pakilagay ang code that you can see on your screen or pakiclick yung link provided in the chat box here in Zoom and in the comment section for those who are watching us live in YouTube. Maaari po tayong gumamit ng kahit anong lengguwahe, dialekto sa pagsulat ng ating mga expectations sa ating Menti board. Alright, so tingnan natin kung ano ang ating mga expectations for this morning. Meron na po ba? I hope na everyone's excited and thrilled to learn more para sa ating last day of learning event. Tama ba, partner?
Yes, ako, I am really, really excited and I've been so happy being the co-host for this 3-day event. I learned a lot and I think some of our participants are also feeling like I am. I hope so.
Yes, indeed. That's very true, actually. With our speakers, very excellent speakers from the different agencies, of course, marami tayong matutunan. So ngayon, basahin natin yung mga expectations ng ating mga participants. Meron tayong practical examples daw. So hopefully yung ating resource person makapagbigay ng mga practical examples based sa kung ano yung mga pangyayari ngayon. Nice. Gutom sa kaalaman. Yes, very hungry of learning. Eager to know more, informative discussions, well-informed information, easy to understand, good, energetic, thankful, of course, prohibition, anong prohibitions? Laws, more knowledge, blessed daw sila for being here or attending here in these sessions. Ano pa ba? Parang, hello, meron pa tayo dito, prohibit, eager to know more, good, nice, legal. They want to know more on the legal aspect of siguro constructing their houses ito. Kaya merong mga nagsasabi ring practical examples kasi gusto rin nilang malaman kung ano yung mga processes, procedures. Although na-discuss na siya before, meron po tayong mag-discuss din ngayon ng building code para mas mapaigian pa yung information, ma-acknowledge natin kung ano-ano yung ating dapat i-follow na rules, processes, and procedures. Okay, so meron tayong learn construction laws. At ang dami, partner. Okay, so siguro naman nakuha ng ating mga participants at nakuha din ng ating facilitators ang mga gustong matutunan at saka inaasahan ng ating mga participants. So, noted po lahat, nakapark po yung ating mga expectations and we will try to meet those expectations sa mga susunod na parte ng ating activity. All right, partner?
Now, to formally open the series and welcome us, I would like to call in the person who will be giving this morning's message. She is the head of programs for CRS Philippines for 2 years now, overseeing a diverse portfolio of programs, including disaster risk reduction, emergency response, shelter, and peace building. Before arriving to the Philippines, she worked for CRS for 7 years in Asia and Europe, managing projects in emergency response, protection of displaced persons, counter trafficking, livelihoods, and partner capacity building. Her experience in human rights and international development includes managing the domestic violence response program of Catholic Charities Oregon and working in community development as a Peace Corps volunteer in Costa Rica. Ladies and gentlemen, my pleasure to introduce to you Miss Karen James Unger, our CRS Head of Programs. Good morning, Miss Karen.
Good morning. Thank you, Meryl. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the third day of Catholic Relief Services SHAKE project's Earthquake Safety Information Dissemination. To our partners from the national government agencies, Department of Science and Technology, Philippine Institute of Volcanology and Seismology, Department of Public Works and Highways, Office of Civil Defense, Department of Interior and Local Governance, Local Government Academy, the National Housing Authority, the League of Cities Philippines, and the academia. To our local government units from various parts of the country, as well as SHAKE partner LGUs, Manila, Pasig, Pateros, Caloocan, and San Jose del Monte in Bulacan. To our barangay officials, community leaders, and individuals watching us through Zoom and YouTube. To our diocesan partners and distinguished resource persons from Department of Public Works and Highways and PhilVox. It is with much gladness in my heart on behalf of Catholic Relief Services that I welcome everyone to the third and final day of the learning series organized by the SHAKE project. In the last 2 days, we heard and learned about non-structural and structural mitigation measures to make our households safer from the impact of an earthquake. Today, we will hear from our engineers from DPWH and PhilVox on the national law, the National Building Code, and guidelines in building construction. The National Building Code of the Philippines, Republic Act number 6541, provides a framework of minimum standards and requirements for all buildings and structures by guiding, regulating, and controlling their location, siting, design, quality of materials, just to name a few. The second topic will focus on the building typology in the Philippines and their earthquake vulnerability curves. In lieu of the National Building Code's building classification, the University of Philippines Diliman Institute of Civil Engineering, in partnership with the Association of Structural Engineers of the Philippines and the Philippine Institute of Civil Engineers, developed a building classification to know the vulnerability curve of the structure based on its typology against a strong earthquake. We still have time to prepare ourselves for a big one that may come, and we have time to prepare our houses better. Today's learning event hopes to deepen our appreciation of the importance complying with the construction standards for our risk reduction efforts. I finally would like to thank USAID, the United States Agency for International Development. If it weren't for them, this event would not be possible. To our partners, DOST PhilVox, Caritas Pasig, and the Commission on Social Action Malolos. Without your unwavering support, we wouldn't have made it this far. Today, to all our guests and participants, please be open-minded, converse, exchange ideas, and discuss. Enjoy the learning event, and best of luck to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Miss Karen, for that wonderful, wonderful welcome message. And I am really, really excited for the third and last day of our webinar series. Partner, why don't we ask them for a little
Yes,
activity before we go into the session? Yes?
partner. So since this is our last day of learning event, siguro marapat po lamang na magkaroon tayo ng souvenir group photo. Pwede po ba? We would like to request everyone to enable or turn on their cameras so that we could take a group photo. Let's count from 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. Na-capture po ba? Na-capture po ba natin, Miss Marcel?
Isa pa daw.
Isa pa? Okay. Another 10 counts. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Right? Did you get it? Okay na po?
Yes, that's good. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you so much. You may now turn off your cameras. Thank you for your participation. So before we go into the first discussion, we would like to inform our participants that you can tell us your questions through our menti.com. Use the password or on your screen or click the link in the chat box or comment section in YouTube. Please indicate the name of the speaker that you are addressing your questions to. Ang ating pong magiging mga topics ngayon ay maaring maraming technical na mga salita at ideya. Kung meron pong hindi malinaw sa atin, ilagay lamang po ito sa ating Menti board at babalikan po natin yon maya-maya lamang during our open forum.
To begin,
Partner?
yes, to begin the first part of our webinar series, I would like to introduce our first speaker from the DOST Feebox to discuss the topic building typology in the Philippines and their respective earthquake vulnerability curves. Our resource person is a graduate of BS in Civil Engineering from the Central Luzon Polytechnic College, uh, has a postgraduate diploma in earthquake engineering, International Institute of Seismology and Earthquake Engineering in Tsukuba, Japan, has a Master's of Science in Regional and Urban Planning from the UP Diliman. It has a wide range of experience, including being the project leader for the establishment of tsunami early warning system in high-risk coastal communities in the Philippines, as project leader in the earthquake and tsunami impact assessment and establishment of tsunami early warning system for Abra de Ilog in Occidental Mindoro, and he was involved in the seismic and tsunami network development and expansion. To discuss again the topic building typology in the Philippines and their respective earthquake vulnerability curves, our resource person, engineer Angelito Angel Lanusa. Magandang umaga po, Sir Angel.
Magandang umaga po sa inyong lahat at sa lahat po ate. Muli, nagbabalik po para sa ating mga participants. Okay po, isa doon sa narinig ko po na parang expectation ay easy to understand daw at saka yung practical example. So pipilitin po natin yan na maging understandable po sa inyong lahat, no? Okay, so this morning, ito po ay palagay ko marami po sa inyo ang Marami po sa inyo ang somehow mabibigla na marami pala tayong pagkakaiba-iba po ng pagpaliwanag tungkol sa ating mga buildings in the Philippines, no? And aside from presenting to you the building typologies in the Philippines, ay sasama na rin po natin yung mga outcomes po ng mga previous studies in terms of earthquake vulnerability po of all these different buildings in the Philippines. So my topic for today is building typology and earthquake vulnerability curves, no? Okay. But once again, I am Angelito Lanusa po of DOST Feebox. So ganito po ang nangyari, no? These are the key building types in the Philippines po. Nung mga 2010, we realized po na medyo bawat munisipyo or here in the Philippines ay bawat ahensya ng gobyerno ay may pagkakaiba-iba ng pagka-classify po ng mga structures or mga kabahayan, no? So nung may project po nung 2010, ay nag-push po ito para magkaroon tayo ng engineering building classification na uniform. In terms of ginawa po ng FIVOX and together with the UP Institute of Civil Engineering, no, ay nagkaroon tayo ng project na yung identification and description of key buildings in the Philippines. Yan po kasi noong 2010, may isang software po kasi ang FIVOX called REDAS or Rapid Earthquake Damage Assessment System. At that time, yung damage assessment system or the DAS ng REDAS ay hindi pa po fully equipped for that kind of assessment. So this project called Quiver or Quick Unified Inventory of Vulnerability and Exposure in REDAS ay nagbigay daan din po upang i-harmonize natin in the Philippines ang mga pagka-classify po ng mga kabahayan at mga buildings. Okay po, ito po yung katotohanan sa ngayon in terms of exposure and building typology. Para mas sa madaling salita po, when we say exposure, ito lang po yung pagkakaiba-iba ng klase ng mga structures in the Philippines po, no? And the big picture, the country has, nabanggit ko na, has several existing exposure databases depending on the use which lead to different building typologies po. No, NSO, iba din silang building typing, no? Ngayon po yung NSO is called PSA, no? And yun ding sa assessor's office or yung mga munisipyo or mga syudad po, ay iba din sila mag-classify po ng mga buildings, more of the material sila kasi nga ang iba yung objective, it's for the taxation, no? And then doon naman sa engineering group, specifically head by the engineers of the Philippines, no, yung tinatawag nating Philippine Building Stock. And in most cases or for the longest time, tayo po ay nag-a-adapt lamang ng mga building classification ng US, no? Ang nangyayari po diyan, meron po tayong mga kabahayan or mga structures na hindi natin siya maklasify. That's the problem, no? Kaya nung gagawa natin na sila ng mga vulnerability curves, ay medyo nahihirapan tayo. Bibigyan ko na kayo as early as this time na example, yung mga CHB houses that we have discussed nung June 15, medyo nahirapan kami at that time, where do we classify CHB houses, no? Later, throughout the discussion po, mas maiintindihan nyo and I hope na pag-uwi po ninyo sa inyong mga bahay-bahay, ay marunong na po kayo mag-classify ng kung hindi man po mga buildings or yung mga high-end buildings na tinatawag natin yung mga high-rise ones, at least po yung mga klase ng bahay po ay maintindihan natin ano ang classification nila at ano ang kanilang mga vulnerabilities, no? Okay po, so balikan lang natin na mabilisan kung paano mag-classify po ang PSA, no? The national census is conducted every 10 years. So for isang nating dilemma dito, within 10 years, pwede pong ang dami na umusbong ng mga buildings o baka nga may mga lumabas pang mga hybrid, no, na kumbaga nagkakaroon ng gap dun sa database natin. And the census is based on number of housing units, not on number of buildings. It has several approaches and categorization. Basically, it is based on materials, structural components, based on occupancy, and based on attributes such as the floor, yung year of construction or the era of the construction. Yan po yung sa NSO. Ito naman po yung sa assessor's office, has handled the categorization and another independent census po. Meron din silang data. Halos kumpleto po yan base dun sa kanilang pangangailangan sa pagkolekta nga ng tax, no? The categorization is mainly based on the material of the main structural components, no? So, diyan kayo nagtataka pagka kinukolektahan na kayo ng mga milyar, no? Depende yan kung saan gawa ang inyong mga bahay, no? Ang nagsisurvey niyan at nagde-decide ay the assessor's office, no? This is basically how the assessor's office classify buildings, no? 4 na klase lang, type 1, type 2, type 3, type 4, no? And type 1 is the reinforced concrete. Tandaan niyo po dito, medyo parang missing dito yung masonry, no? Semi-concrete. strong materials, and light materials. This four is subdivided into several subcategories, no? Kung anong klase ng bubong, anong klase ng pader, ganyan po, no? And the type 4 is basically the makeshift or yung kung ano-ano lang materials na ginamit, dun siya magpo-fall sa type 4. So ang missing dito so far ay yung masonry and the steel structure. Nasaan ngayon dyan nakaklasify ng assessor's office. Although, ang pagkakaalam ko po, ang assessor's offices po of different cities and municipalities ay may bago ng classification na 1 to 5 to basically include the steel structures. Ibig lang po sabihin yan, yung RC or the type 1 ay halos purely semento siya or konkreto, shall I say. Type 2 po ay kalahati. May combination na po ng kahoy at ng concrete. And type 3 naman po ay basically kahoy ng mga structures. And type 4, as I have mentioned earlier, ay yung pong mga makeshift or ginamitan ng kung ano-ano materials po. Okay? So ito po yung katanungan dyan, the missing part of this old one. Although, as I have mentioned, 5 na daw po ang classification ng assessor's office ngayon to include steel structure. For engineering building stock categorization naman, nabanggit ko rin earlier that it is basically derived from the building classification of the US, no? And the categorization is based on several characteristics. Basically, it includes materials, wood. In this case, meron na pong salitang masonry, and concrete, and steel, no? Structural naman po, this is the element that says kung meron po kayong frame, shear walls. Ang shear walls po ay yung parang buhos din na poste, pero manipis ito kaya mukha siyang wall. And kung meron pong mga bracing system. Kasabay din po nito yung pagka-categorize natin ng mga buildings, kung ano ba yung mga low-rise, medium-rise, high-rise. 3 lang nung simula natin. LMH lang, no? Pero later or sooner or later maiintindihan nyo po na yung palang mga hindi pala lahat ng high-rise ay high lang ay itatawag natin, no? Yan po yan. And then, so from the HASUS building classification, ito po yung sa HASUS, no? Yung sa US, I mean, na building classification, in this case po, meron po diyang mga classification na hindi po natin siya natatagpuan sa Philippines. For example po, yung MH or the mobile homes, no? Wala tayo niyan dito sa Pilipinas. So bakit natin siya i-adapt? And then the S5 and the C3, no? Ito po ang nakita natin, dito naman yung mga naka-red such as the W3, MS, or masonry structure, no? O tas yung concrete and wood combination structure, and then yung mga hollow blocks houses natin, and yung unreinforced stone or adobe natin, na structures in the Philippines. Kung if you're going to adopt yung HASUS building classification po, marami po palang kabahayan in the Philippines na hindi natin siya malaan saan natin siya i-classify, no? So, basically, this is the suggested building classification adopting more than half of the HASUS building classification or the US building classification para maging customized siya into the needs of the Philippines, no? Yan po. So, yung binabanggit ko po in 2010 ay eto na yung kinahinatnan, no? So, ang pinagmulan po nung bago nating building typology or the classification in the Philippines, it is basically derived from the Philippine building stock categorization, and it has more subtypes due to more details observed on structural types, no? Such as the materials, structure, building heights, at saka po yung era ng construction. Later, didiscuss natin yan, bakit merong, ano ang significance of this 1972-1992 in terms of building code po. So, this is the one we introduce in classifying our own buildings in terms of height po. Tandaan niyo po ito, no? So, yung pong mga low-rise natin is basically yung mga ating mga tahanan or kabahayan, 1 to 2 floors lang siya. Tapos yung medium rise po ay yung 3 to 7 floors. Ang high-rise po natin ay hanggang 15 floors lang or 8 to 15 floors. Pag lumagpas dyan, but not exceeding 25, ang tawag na po natin dyan ay very high rise. And then pag lumagpas naman po ng 25 but not exceeding 35, ang tawag na po natin dyan ay extremely high rise structures. Tapos more than 35, or 36 and above, ang tawag na po natin dyan either skyscrapers or the super high structures. So yan po yan, ano? So hindi lahat ng mataas na structure ang tatawag natin ay high. Kasi nasanay po tayo dati na tatlo lang yung pagka-classify natin in terms of height. So yan po yung ini-introduce natin na Philippine building classification po, no? Okay. So sa vintage naman po, sa totoo lang po, for your information, nagkaroon po tayo ng building code. Nabanggit ko na rin nung previous lecture natin that our code is, sabi nga ng ibang bansa, is napakaganda raw ng ating code. So the only issue is kung ini-implement ba natin ito on the ground, no? So nagkaroon po tayo ng code in 1972. Well, I have a feeling po na kaya napilitan na tayo magkaroon ng building code in 1972. Baka may contribution dito yung pagkakabagsak ng Ruby Tower in 1968 na kagagawan po ni kasiguran earthquake, no? Tapos po, in 1992, nagkaroon po ng major revision, no? So basically, the first code natin ay nag-run siya from 1972 to 1992. And then nagkaroon po ng major changes in 1992 to include po yung mga other ductility requirements, no, from the previous versions of the code. Nagkaroon po kasi ng major change diyan. Ductility means yung pagiging malambot po ng ating mga structures, no? Yan po yon. Kaya napaka-importante din po na sa pag-survey natin ng mga structures, kailan siya itinayo, para naiintindihan po natin ang behavior ng ating mga structure at kung ano po ang design standard na finalo niya sa pagkakatindig po ng ating mga structures. Okay, so para sabi ko na sa inyo, kailangan nyo kanyo ng practical example. So yung building classification po that I am discussing, pakikitaan ko po kayo ng mga pictures para po pag uwi ninyo sa inyong mga barangay or sa inyong mga munisipalidad, at least when you go around, you know how to classify your structure. The first po natin na engineering building classification na nire-recommend po natin for the Philippines ay ito pong mga gawa sa kahoy. Hindi pa po natin ito maitatatwa kasi napakarami pa po nating wooden structures in the Philippines, lalo na po sa mga suburbs or doon sa mga ibang bayan, no? So, yung wood po or mga bahay na gawa sa kahoy, dinivide natin yan into 6 na subcategories, W1, W3, W5, W2, W4, and makeshift nga. Ano pa? Okay, so these are the pictures of the W1 or the wood one. Ano pa? So medyo madali naman natin siya maintindihan or baka nga medyo pawala na siya, no, dahil sa pagkaka-lagban natin in the 70s until 80s, no? So medyo kumukonti na rin yung ating mga wooden structures. Okay po? So that's W1. Ito po yung typical na bahay, yung W1. Pagka po naging commercial siya at medyo wider siya dun sa W1, itatawag po natin dyan ay W2. No? W2. At pagka naman po mga kawayan, itatawag natin dyan ay W3 or yung mabahay kubo natin. Ano? Marami pa rin po yan. Pag-iikot natin nung nakararaan lamang ay sobrang dami pa po ng ganyang klase ng bahay natin po. And these kind of houses po should be included in the impact assessment then, no? So mapapansin po natin itong mga ganitong klaseng bahay maaring wala sa database ng isang munisipyo. Dahil nga hindi naman ito dumadaan sa permitting, no? Yun po ang madalas naming marinig sa mga engineering office na meron lang daw silang data yung mga permitted. Ito naman po W4, actually parang dati ganito po yung bahay namin, ano? W4, this is a bagong kategorya na dinagdag po natin under wooden, no? Kasi nga siguro ito po yung time na ini-introduce natin yung hollow blocks in the Philippines. Pero nanatili pong ang poste. Ang mga poste ay kahoy, no? Lalagyan ng konting pako sa gilid-gilid ng kahoy and then ididikit natin yung mga CHB. Yan po yung kategorya. So, kategorya na W4. So, wood frame siya. Later or throughout the lecture po, may intindihan nyo kung ano ibig sabihin po ng frame, no? And then, ito rin po ay medyo bago, no? Bago under the wood classification po, no? Yung bottom niya ay half concrete. Tapos po yung upper portion niya ay, mapapansin niyo po dito, sa assessors database po, ang tawag nila dito is sokalo, no? Yung kalahati po ng pader ay hollow blocks, tapos yung upper portion ay kahoy or sawali, ganyan po, no? So, yan po ay bago din na kategorya at more or less iintindihin po din natin ang vulnerability ng mga ganyang klaseng bahay po or W5. Okay, ito naman po yung makeshift na kung ano-anong pinagtagpi-tagping materyales po, no? So, kadalasan po sa makeshift ay kahoy, no? Pero may mga bago din ngayon, yung mga tarpaulin, no? Na inipon po for makeshift. Ito po yung supposedly kamukha nun sa US na mobile homes. Pero po yung kanilang mga mobile homes in the US ay sobrang magagara po yun, no? So, hindi siya basta-basta ang materyales. So, hindi rin po siya comparable. Kaya nararapat lamang po napalitan natin yung mobile homes nila into makeshift. Okay? Now, ito po, papunta na po tayo sa masonry. Ito yung binabanggit ko na nawawala doon sa assessor's office. Kasi hindi naman po natin siya masisi kasi for other ordinary people, masonry or konkreto, no? Ang tawag lang natin diyan ay semento, iisa pag sa Tagalog, no? Pero malaki po ang pagkakaiba niyan, lalo na po sa kanilang mga vulnerabilities o yung behavior during the ground shaking. So, ito pong building classification nito, finally, kaya po namin ito ini-introduce ng masidhe kasi po diyan po ay klaro na nakaklasify natin sila hollow block houses. Na-discuss natin yan last time. At saka po yung mga ibatan houses natin, no? Mga pinagpatong-patong na bato or pwede rin natin tawagin po ito na URS or unreinforced stone na pinagpatong-patong po, no? At matatagpuan po natin ito sa Batanes na hindi po rin natin siya po pwedeng tanggalin na riyan kasi we still have those kind of structures po that exist in the Philippines. And ito naman po, RM1, meaning to say, masonry nga siya, pero medyo reinforced. Meaning to say, meron po siya mga bakal, no? At yung MWS naman po ay sa combination of yung bandang ibaba ay masonry. When I say masonry, ito po yung mga walang poste, no? Tapos pinatungan po ng second floor nagawa po sa kahoy. Kaya MWS, it's a combination of masonry and wooden structure po siya. And then yung mga unreinforced masonry natin, basically the old churches natin, no? Yan po, ang pagkakagawa po ng mga simbahan natin noong unang panahon or the like, no? Ay wala nga yung bakal, subalit napakalalapad or makakapal naman po ang mga pader niyan na pinagpatong-patong. Tapos meron pa siyang mga sheeting sa ilalim na parang mga cyclone wires na gano'n po para mag-hold po nung pinakapuno ng mga pader na yan. Marami pa rin po tayo niyan. Alam naman natin lahat yan. And then meron din po tayo nung category number 2 ng reinforced masonry. Pictures. Ito po yung sa CHB. Ito yung pinakita ko sa inyo last time na nagdala tayo ng hollow block sa Japan at tinest natin, no? At yung picture po sa bandang itaas, yan po yung model natin for the model B, no? O, inuulit ko lang. And then as per code po, yun nasa bandang kanan na picture. So yun po yung code compliant na CHB house po natin in the Philippines. Okay? Ito po yung pictures ng mga unreinforced adobe or unreinforced stone. And then yung pong unreinforced masonries natin na napakita ko na earlier, no? Para lang mas matandaan natin po itong mga building classifications na to. Ito naman po yung reinforced masonry 1 and reinforced masonry 2. Okay? And then, ito po yung combination. I'm sure marami pa pong makaka-relate sa bahay na ito. No? Hollow blocks ang ilalim na bahay and then kahoy po ang second floor. Okay? And then, papunta na po tayo dito sa medyo karamihan po sa mga structure na to ay dumadaan po sa permitting. Ito na yung tinatawag po natin na konkreto. So kanina po, masonry. No? Basically lang yon ay gawa sa mga bato, hollow blocks. Yun po yung masonry. Pag concrete na houses naman po, ito po ay kumpleto po yung frame. Napaliwanag ko na rin last time what is frame all about. Ito po yung magkakaugnay ang biga or beam, ang poste, para po ay sila kabit-kabit, no, para bumuo ng isang parang cube na frame po. Tapos sa pagitan noon ay gagawaan natin or papatungan natin ng bubong at sa mga pagitan noon ay lalagyan natin ng mga CHB walls. Ang importante po doon is the frame or the poste na may combine nga po na beam, no? At yun po ay buhos ng mga poste. So yun po yung concrete. Kaya wag po tayong malilito dun sa masonry at saka konkreto. Sa Tagalog kasi, concrete saka masonry ay Tagalog. Ang Tagalog ay semento. Ganun po. Kaya siguro na paghahalo natin yung dalawa na yan. Which is actually, magkaiba po ang performance niyan in terms of ground shaking. No? So ayan po yung sub-categories natin under concrete at ito po ang mga picture. So reinforced concrete moment frames, no, or we call this as C1. So RC houses, nandiyan po yung frames, no, na-discuss ko na what is frame all about. Ito po yung supposedly karamihang bahay natin, no. Unfortunately, meron pong gumagawa nito na medyo substandard yung poste or mas maliit sa 30 by 30 cm. So pagka in that case po, nararapat lamang pong medyo ibaba natin ang kanyang kategorya na as CHB. Kasi po, nagiging parehas siya ng performance po ng CHB under masonry. No? Ganun po yan. And then, eto po ay bagong kategorya kasi nagsulputan po ang ating mga gymnasium, palengke na walang mga pader. Subalit kumpleto po ang kanilang mga poste or the frame no itself. So yan po kaya dinadagdag natin diyan yung C1-0. Unfortunately wala pa po itong vulnerability curve as of now. Ito naman po yung kung kanina po sa masonry meron po tayong MWS. Sa konkreto po, meron din po tayong CWS. Napakadali pong intindihin ni Re. Yung bandang ibaba ay konkreto. Again, kapag konkreto, may poste, may beam. Bago mo ito patungan ng wooden part for the second floor. Yung kanina, CHB lang, kaya MWS siya. Walang poste. Yan lang po, no? Para mas madali natin ikumpara at madali natin matandaan. Pag may poste, pinatungan mo ng kahoy, as the second floor, tatawagin na po natin ito na CWS. Okay, eto medyo papa-high-end na tayo ng mga structures kasi po siyempre pag habang tumataas ang ating mga structures, medyo lumalambot pa po yan kung if it is purely frame ulit pinagsama-samang beam tsaka columns. So there are cases po na bukod sa meron na siyang poste at beams ay nilalagyan pa nila ito ng buhos na pader, no? So ang tawag po dun sa buhos na pader na yon ay shear wall, no? Or ang tawag din ng mga engineers diyan ay yung tinatawag ng mga dual system. Meron ka na kasing frame structure and then meron ka pang pampatigas or pamparigid ng building na buhos na pader. Yun lang po yon, no? So basically concrete na word has something to do with the term po sa Tagalog na buhos, no? Purely buhos. Okay. Ito naman po yung C4. Ito po, yung tumaas na. Tapos ito na, parang halos katulad din siya ng... Okay, by the way pala, ito po palang si shear walls, pwede po ito na hindi kumpleto ang kanyang mga poste, pero kinompensate po siya nung kanyang mga shear walls, no? Yung frame niya may not be complete. When I say frame again, beams and columns, it may not be complete, but the frame is compensated po or sinalo siya nung buhos na pader. Ito naman po is the purely combination of the buhos na pader and also the complete frame po, no? May poste na, may beam pa, may buhos pang pader somewhere. So ito po basically yung tinatawag na dual system, the C4. Okay? So yan po yung mga pictures. And then ito naman pong precast, no, na concrete. Meron tayong dalawa na tinatawag, precast concrete shear wall na PC1 and PC2, no? Basically po, itong mga precast na to, yung mga, kaya tinawag siyang precast, yung mga pader, yung mga poste, yung mga beams, ginawa po somewhere or sa pagawaan, and then binitbit lang dito sa site para po isa-isang itindig, no? Kung nakikita niyo po yung paggawa ng span ng tawag dito, yung LRT, ano? 'Di ba? Yung buong span na 'yan, dinadala lang doon sa site. Yun po yung mga example po ng mga precast. Ganon din po dito sa mga precast structures. So we call those PC1 and PC2. Now moving po doon sa steel structure. Ito po para po mas madali uli nating maintindihan, mayroon na naman tayong gagamitin ditong term na frame. Dito, frame uli, poste, at saka beam. Papalitan lang po natin si konkreto ng bakal. No? So S1, yan po, mapapansin nyo sa picture, meron po siyang beam, meron siyang bakal na poste. S2 naman, nilalagyan natin siya ng bracing system. No? Yung mga diagonal na yan, para mas maging rigid yung ating structure po. Kasi alam naman po natin na ang behavior ng steel ay mas tensile or mas malambot siya. Kaya kailangan po natin siyang dagdagan ang kanyang rigidity or yung pagiging stiff, no? And then meron din po tayong idinagdag na bago dyan, yung S10, kung saan po ang mga gamit na poste ay bakal, kaso wala po siyang mga infill walls, no? S3 naman po, nag-uusbungan na rin po yan. These are the light steel materials po, no? Sabi nga, pagka daw po light ang materials mo, mas resistant siya sa ground shaking. However, hindi natin alam ang performance naman niya pagdating sa severe wind. And then yung mga high-end po, or yung mga, okay, when I say high-end, yun po yan mga medyo expensive, no? Na mga structures. Dito naman sa S4, palitan po natin si concrete ng bakal, beam and columns to form a frame. Yun po yung ating S4. Okay? So this is C1 po na example, pictures as I've shown kanina. And then ito yung bago na S1. Sorry, hindi pala C1 yun. S1, no? I said C1. So this is S1. This is S1 -0, bago po, no? Yung mga gymnasium natin, yung mga ganyan, no? Open wall siya, no? And then ito yung sandali. Medyo tatanggalin ko lang po ito, nakukuberan yung aking PowerPoint. Yan. So sa S2, meron po mga diagonal bracing system yan. Okay po, no? And then light materials as S3. Excuse me. Okay po, light materials as S3. Okay, ito po yung merong shear wall, no? Or S4. Shear wall again, buhos na pader, no? So, from all those projects, then after the realization po natin in 2010, although hindi pa ito nag-exist sa code natin, or sa any guidelines po in classifying buildings, engineering building classification po, ito po yung recommended namin together with the UPDIs na Philippine Building Classification to include yung mga structures natin that are truly exist on the ground somewhere in the kung saan-saan man in the Philippines po, no? So yung naka-red po, yan po yung suggested natin to be included to have for us to have our own building classification in the Philippines. Okay po. So sige po, konting exercise lang, mabilisan. Picture, kayo na pong sumagot sa sarili nyo kung paano nyo i-classify po this picture po ng structure. Pero bibigay ko na rin po yung sagot, no? Para pag binigay ko po sa inyo itong PowerPoint, at least meron po kayong reference. So this is URM daw, or unreinforced masonry. And then next picture, ito po, sino makaka-relate dito? W1 ba to? W2 or W3? So this is W1, no? Kasi purely kahoy siya. And then, okay po, this is a combination of masonry and wooden structure. Kahoy po yung ibabaw, masonry ilalim. Next picture, ito daw po ay may poste po, no? May konkreto po yung ibaba, kahoy po yung bandang itaas. Ito naman, ito yung common, no, na C1. However, may konting changes. So papansin nyo, nagkakaroon ng M or L. Again, what is L? Pag dalawang floors lang siya, kompleto ng frames, it should be C1L. Pag lumagpas na po siya sa dalawa, it should be C1M, no? Or medium rise na kasi. So medium rise ay, let me repeat, from 3 to 15 floors po. From 3 to 7 floors po yun, no? And then 8 to 15 ay yung high rise. Okay? So ito na po yung tawag naman natin, C2 or C4 po siya maka-classify. Okay po. So ano po bang significance noon, no? Kasi po may ginawa po ang FIVOX na para mga vulnerability curves po nga. Para po sana lahat ng munisipyo ay makakita tayo ng database kung saan kaya nilang imapa nasan yung mga C1 na structure sa kanila. Later, papaliwanag natin yung mga vulnerabilities nun and the behavior para after an earthquake, alam po natin ilang ganong klase ng buildings ang pwedeng maapektuhan, masira. Ganun po, ano? Halimbawa, si HB, kung kayo po sa inyong barangay or sa inyong bayan, meron kayong numero, sabihin natin 100, mamaya pagpakita ko po ng vulnerability curves ng CHB, maiintindihan nyo po na ganitong numero, more or less, ang bumagsak na CHB type of buildings after or babagsak sa ganitong size po ng earthquake. Di po ba sana? So napapansin natin yung kakulangan ng database po, ano? So nagtry sa kakulangan po ng database na 'yan or data na 'yan sa Iloilo po in 2010, meron kaming isang ginawang method na nag-survey lang po kami ng 3 barangay and then we paint it brass po sa other barangays para lang po magkaroon kami ng estimated numbers of those mga Ayun. Parang meron pong nag-on ng mic, no? So, yun po. Para po magkaroon po tayo ng mga numero ng mga different building types po, no? Tulad nito po, sa Iloilo City, yun daw C1L or konkretong bahay na 1 to 2 floors, ito po yung kanyang density or distribution for different barangays, no? Tapos, kinukumpara natin siya doon sa classify naman ng assessors, no? Yung type 1, type 2, ganun po, ano? And then, ito rin po, nakuha natin yung C1 o concrete houses na 3 to 7 floors po, no? Sa Iloilo City po ito. So, ganda, no? Pero 3 barangays lang po yung sinurvey natin dyan. At yun po yung tinatawag na in-applyan po natin ng paintbrushing method para po magkaroon tayo ng mga numero per barangays po. Pero again, yung po mga numero na yun ay estimated. So ito naman po yung concrete wooden structure density for Iloilo City that we have done in 2010 po. Yung picture po dito sa may bandang kanan, yan po yung equivalent po and then sinamahan na natin ng pagkaka-type or pagka-classify ng assessor's building classification. Ito po yung W1, no? So mukhang may nag-on na ng camera. So baka lapse na po ako sa oras ko. So bibilisan po natin to. Sample lang po ito sa Iloilo, no? Tapos po ay Ito po, combining the hazard, exposure, and vulnerability. Ayan po ano, so meron tayo mga scenario earthquakes, tapos ito po yung distribution of different type, no? And then meron tayong vulnerability curve na we're going to discuss soon. Magkakaroon po tayo ng result na ganyan. For example, complete damage for this scenario earthquake na magnitude 6.3, magnitude 8.1, ito daw po yung damage in Iloilo City. No? So sana po lahat ng bayan meron din ganyan mga estimate po. Tapos pwede rin po nakalista yan, yun daw po C1L, yan daw po 1,600 po ang madadamage, yun daw po C1M, ayan po ay 170 daw po ang madadamage. Kung dadalawin uli ang Iloilo City ng magnitude 6.3 scenario, no? Ito naman sa 8.1 na earthquake, yan daw po ano, so parang nasa 7,000 o close to 7,000 na C1L daw po ang masisira. Mga ganyan po, no? So, yan po, sa kakulangan po ng data, ang PBOX po ay naggawa din po ng mga tool para po makumpleto po natin yung database natin. Ayan, ano? So, yung REDAS po ay meron pong EDM mode o EDM para po sana makumpleto po natin yung ating exposure database or yung tinatawag nating building database. Meron din po yan online, submission po ng data through our GeoMapper exposure data mapper po. Ano? And it can be done using mga street view or any po geotag pictures of the buildings. No? So again, eto po, maganda po sana kung inyong bayan magkaroon ng database po, yung bandang gitna, eto, no? And then, kami naman na po, together with the UPDIs, ang magpo-provide nitong vulnerability curves para po magkaroon kayo ng mga numero na ito. Okay? Sa bandang kanan. So, ito pong vulnerability curves na sinasabi ko, picture-picture na lang po ipapakita ko sa inyo. Okay? Ito po ay, as I have mentioned, we can skip this, the mga definition of terms. Vulnerability po means only ganito lang. Ano? For intensity 9 daw po, kung ano man po itong graph na to na klase ng building, ang babagsak daw po ay more than 50%. No? Ito po, no? Titingnan natin dyan. So if you have the number at intensity 9, alam po ninyo kung ilan po yung babagsak in or madadamage sa inyo pong bayan. No? Ganyan lang po ibig sabihin ng vulnerability curve. No? At ginawa po ito ng UP sa ganitong pamamaraan or method po. Vulnerability curves, ginamitan po nila ito ng empirical formula. Ibig sabihin po, ayon pong mga pangyayari in the past na I don't know kung included na po yung 1990 earthquake dyan, for each, parang binilang nila yung ganong klaseng type ng building, ilan ang bumagsak, nung mga nakararaang lindol po. Yun po yung empirical. No? Computational naman po, this is masyadong math ito, kaya hindi na natin ipapakita dito. Computational means lahat po kasi ng mga structure, meron po yung pagiging marupok or kahinaan. No? Ang tawag po natin doon ay yung fragility curve. May kanya-kanya pong pagiging pagka-fragile bawat structure po. Tapos, so basically, yan po yung ipinasok dyan sa computational. Ito naman pong heuristic, dahil po sa kakulangan ng data natin, kinolekta po ni UPDIs lahat po ng mga experts, civil engineers, architects, and then magpapakita po sila ng picture of building type, and then sasabihin nila at what intensity level babagsak yung ganong type po. Ganon. Tapos kinolekta po natin yung opinion ng mga experts at yun po yung tinatawag nating heuristic method po. Ganon po nabuo itong mga following vulnerability curves. For example, this is for wooden one, no? Pinakita natin kanina. Ang ito po sa picture dito, ito po yung itsura ng W1. Ang ibig lamang pong sabihin nito, at intensity 8, yung ganitong bahay, ilang porsyento ang babagsak? Dito po ay halos nasa 48% na po. No? Ang titingnan natin dito sa may bandang kaliwa. For W1. For W3, yung bahay kubo po, sinasabi at intensity 8, kalahati po. Kung may 100 kayong ganyang building in your municipality, so 50 po yung posible na pong bumagsak at intensity 8. Ano po? Ito yung intensity 8. Intensity sa baba. And then ito po for makeshift natin or N. So at intensity 8 daw, dito natin i-concentrate, no? So 60% of this kind of structure ay pwedeng masira na. So yan po yung vulnerability curve, no? And then ito yung MWS natin, sinasabi dito na ganun din 50% of this type of structure ay babagsak na po ay at intensity 7 pa lang, no? 50% na. And then ito yung classic example natin, even last time, yung CHB houses natin at intensity 7 ay kalahati na po ng kung ilan man meron tayo nito sa ating munisipyo. Okay, ito namang mga Ibatan houses, 40% at intensity 7 or shall I say 60% of this type ay pwede na pong maapektuhan ang ganitong klase ng structures, no? Ito naman po ay actually yung picture po nito is actually the damage of the 2013 Bohol earthquake, no, in Bohol. So yung ganito daw po yung URM natin or the unreinforced masonry, mga historical churches natin yan at intensity 8 daw, ang babagsak dyan ay close to 60%, no? And then ito naman ate, again, ito yung CWS or the concrete wooden structure at intensity 8 daw, it is around 54% daw po ng ganitong type ay babagsak ang intensity 8, no? Ito yung common na si 1, pag 1 to 2 story, L siya. So, mukhang medyo matibay-tibay ito, no? At intensity 8 po, 40% lang yung pwedeng maapektuhan at intensity 8, no? Ito yung kahit tumaas na siya, parehas lang din ito nung sa C1L, no? Ito naman intensity 8, 30%. Ibig sabihin, medyo engineered po yung mga ganitong structures, no? And then ito naman po ay sa C4M, no, 40% of this type can be affected at intensity 8. The same with this type C4H at intensity 8, around 40% of this type can be affected by an intensity 8 shaking. For the mga precast natin, ito ay sinasabi na intensity 8 is around 34% ang pwede pong maapektuhan at intensity 8. Ito naman sa ating another precast type at intensity 8 daw ay mga around 47% ang pwede maapektuhan po nito, no? Ganyan lang po si vulnerability curve. For our S1 or yung poste again and beam ay gawa sa bakal at intensity 8, 40% of this may be affected by intensity 8. At ito naman pong bakal ang poste at beam at intensity 8, matibay pala ito, no? So, 20% lang ang pwedeng maapektuhan po nito, no? And then sa light materials, mga 28% po ang pwedeng maapektuhan at intensity 8. And for the another light materials din po na medyo mataas lang, ay nasa less than 30% na pwedeng maapektuhan at intensity 8. Okay po. Ito, mga sample na lang po ito, no? For example po sa Mindanao, meron po kasi tayong software that can actually, nakapasok na po kasi dito all those 18 vulnerability curves of 18 building types na ini-introduce namin to be, hopefully, shout out sa ating mga engineering group, hopefully ito na po yung i-adapt ng engineering group natin so that very much harmonized tayo. Kasi kung nakapasok na po ito dito sa software na ito, magse-senaryo tayo ngayon para makita po natin yung ilan po ang maapektuhan sa inyong munisipyo. For example, ito po, scenario earthquake natin is the 7.5 earthquake in Mindanao Fault. Iraran po natin yung REDA software and then ito po ang kalalabasan niya na intensity distribution done by that software, REDAS. Tapos po, ipapasok po natin yung vulnerability curves na yon. Tapos po kung meron lang kayo sanang exposure database or building database, then sana po dito makikita natin ilang ganong klase ng building ang maapektuhan. Andito po, numero natin makikita. So, including po yung mga effect po sa tao, like including fatalities, ilan na posibleng mamamatay sa ganong size ng earthquake, ganun po, no? And then another scenario earthquake po dito is 7.3 earthquake along the Lanao Fault System. Nag-example na lang po tayo. This is the possible intensity distribution of that size of an earthquake. Tapos po, meron tayong result ng fatalities, mga ganyan po, no? And mga injured, yung mga non-life threatening po, pero still affected siya, na ganyan po. And we can also plot po yung distribution of this risk or affected, no? Yung physical damage din po, pwede nating i-plot on a map. So it will guide all the planners of the local government units, including barangays. No, wala pa yung lindol, na-estimate natin na yung ganito po. So nakikita natin kulang data, no po, sa inyong mga bayan-bayan. Casualties din po can be plot by the software like this. And then pwede po natin siyang in tabular form per barangay actually in terms of damage. At pwede rin po yan, mga numero of the different building typologies that I have discussed. So patikim po yon, pero hindi po natin i-elaborate kung paano natin gawin po dito yung impact assessment. So in summary, yung scenario earthquakes po was already discussed to yung June 15. So today, what we have focused on ay sa building types or yung tinatawag nating exposure database. And I have discussed to you yung different vulnerabilities na nagawaan na ng vulnerability curves na sa ngayon po so far for earthquake vulnerability, 18 building type pa lang po or 18 vulnerability curves pa lang po yung available. Out of those, what we are recommending na building classification in the Philippines. Yun pong introduction to earthquake impact, nagpakita lang po ako sa inyo ng result kasi isa po yan sa kahihinatnan na sana po lahat ng bayan-bayan ay meron pong ganyan. Ano po ba itong impact assessment na to? Ito yung kung naririnig nyo in 2004, merong Metro Manila earthquake impact study po, no? In 2004 kung saan nagpapakita yan ng ilan yung mga buildings na masisira. And then, kung may numero po tayo na ganoon, meron po tayong mga number na pinagpaplanuhan, either one, for disaster management, pangalawa, mitigation, that may involve retrofitting, strengthening, mga ganun po. And then, yung preparation po ng mga evacuation areas, mga ganun po, and other mga sistema po, no, para po tumibay tayo pagka totoong dumating na itong ganitong particular event. Tapos medyo na upgrade na po yan, yung result na yon, yung mga numero na yon na available naman po at makikita nyo yan sa mga babasahin. At in 2013, we have also included na po yung mga neighboring provinces of Metro Manila. And in 2010 nga, meron tayong binigay na impact result for Iloilo City. So, my talk po ay nag-focus lamang sa building types and vulnerability curves and some sort of introduction to earthquake impact assessment. So with this, thank you very much po for your attention and I hope marami po kayong natutunan and na-realize from my talk. Thank you and good morning.
Thank you very much, Engineer Angel Lanuza, for that very informative discussion on seismic vulnerability curves. So, ayun po, yung na-discuss po sa atin ni Engineer about the different categories of building structures and the seismic vulnerability curves kung saan tinitingnan po doon kung ano po ang mga possible damages na yun lang ba na-on yung mic ko? Possible damages na pwedeng mangyari sa isang category ng building structure. So again, thank you so much, Engineer Lanuza, for your input. So if you have any questions or may mga katanungan po kayo for Engineer Lanuza na gusto nyo pong i-clarify sa kanya, pwede na po nating i-post ang ating mga questions sa ating Menti board kung saan nasa screen po ang ating Menti link at saka naka-post din po sa ating Zoom chat box and sa ating comment section in YouTube. Okay, so our next speaker to discuss the topic Philippine Building Code and Building Audit Guidelines for Local Government Units, Standards in Building Strong Structures based on the Building Code, and he is from the Department of Public Works and Highways under the National Building Code Development Office. He has a bachelor's degree of BS in Civil Engineering and Bachelor of Laws. A member of the Philippine Institute of Civil Engineers, Road Engineering Association of the Philippines, and of course, the Integrated Bar of the Philippines. His specializations are project procurement, contract management, project supervision, right-of-way acquisition and enforcement, building standards, regulations, construction laws, maintenance, and inspectorate. Ladies and gentlemen, our next speaker, Attorney John Alexander Belderol. Good morning, sir.
Hello, good morning, everyone. So
Good
I'm
morning.
very thankful for our host for inviting our agency to present on this topic. Okay, so what I've observed from the previous presentations as well as the response of our audience is that this is a multi-sectoral activity. So we'll begin by discussing, of course, the Philippine Building Act. Okay, that's the uh, forthcoming legislation. But right now, we'll have the National Building Code of the Philippines. Can you see the screen? Okay,
Not yet, sir.
right. So let's go now to our presentation. Now, I've only been given a limited time to present, so I can't discuss everything. I'm sure you don't mind na mag-vernacular tayo from time to time. I think that will make it more appreciate by our audience. Okay, right. So let's begin by, okay, please move the window from shared application. Anyway, our topic right now is earthquake resilient design of residential houses under the National Building Code of the Philippines. Okay, I'll hide this one. Okay. So actually, we can divide our topics into two. Okay, first we'll discuss a general subject matter on National Building Code of the Philippines, and we'll discuss also some background information. Okay. So okay. Now, the purpose of the presentation, I will be discussing that, then some salient points in the National Building Code of the Philippines, then provisions of the NBCP and its revised implementing rules and regulations regarding structural safety and earthquake resilience. Actually, there's not many of these because yung ano natin, yung NBCP, it's more of a general set of regulations and there are references to be discussed also. No? Then miscellaneous requirements for buildings. Yeah, let me just check the chat box. So. Okay. So first, let's discuss the objectives. The objective of, wow, wait, I think there's something wrong. Wait lang, ha? Okay. The objective of this presentation is to inform or guide stakeholders on how to strengthen houses based on the provisions of the NBCP and building audit guidelines provided to LGUs for public infrastructure and government-owned structures, specifically from a construction viewpoint. But there are some key limitations. Okay, so some aspects of the laws cited are generally applicable only to government infrastructure and not necessarily applicable to private construction. Okay, so A few things first before we begin, no? So some of the materials don't belong to me. Okay, so I'm using the fair use of these materials. Pero you'll notice from time to time that I'm not going to discuss in depth some topics because I don't have permission to, right? So let's get on with the presentation. Now, what is earthquake resilient design? All right. Now, in the construction industry, earthquake resilient design incorporates practices and procedures empirically shown to mitigate the physical damage and other adverse effect of seismic events and on structures by employing methods calculated to preserve its integrity and stability and to afford a certain degree of protection to its occupants. Okay. So we'll be talking about earthquake resistant structures, but not really the structural aspects, no? More on the law enforcement aspects. Okay. So regarding earthquake resilient designs, there are some persons who take the center stage in ensuring that uh, the ordinary people will have the benefit of the laws and as well as the best practices. So these are the people who play a part in the earthquake resilient design. So let's start from the top. So our legislators ensures the passage of effective laws such as the NBCP and its amendments and revisions that enshrine state policies regarding earthquake resilient building design. So another set of participants, the regulators such as the DPWH and the building officials, are responsible for carrying out and enforcing legislative policies and standards, as well as the review of designs submitted by the owners or builders for approval prior to construction. Okay. Of course, very important yung ating mga property owners, no? Because they have the final say in key aspects of the design, such as requirements, budget, selection of key personnel involved in planning and implementation. And then the owners are also responsible for ensuring that decisions regarding the design, construction, and operation of their structures are in conformity with rules and regulations for earthquake resilient buildings. Right. Let's minimize this first. Okay. I think this is visible, no, yung screen sharing. I-ano ko muna to. I-minimize. Okay. So may I ask if visible yung screen sharing button sa bottom. Labam nakikita niyo ba yung mga notifications sa side? Sa gitna.
Yan po ba, sir, na may black background? Yung please move this window away from the shared application.
Yes.
Yes po, visible po siya.
Yan ko muna to. Itago. Okay, I think it's very distracting. Right. Sige lang.
It's fine, sir. We'll focus na lang dun sa text sa presentation mo.
All right. Sige. Let's go back a bit, no. So, it's not only the owners na yung talagang may-ari ng buildings, no, who have a part also in ensuring that there's an earthquake resilient design, no. Pati po yung operators of buildings, no. For example, it might be the lessees, no. So I know that some of our countrymen hindi naman po sila yung may-ari ng mga structures na tinitirahan nila. So for the purpose of this presentation, no, they also have a part to play regarding the ensuring that there's earthquake resilient design in their buildings, no? So what are some of the things that we have to keep in mind, no? So it doesn't mean that if we're the owner we can just do anything pagdating po doon sa design, no? So we also have to follow rules and regulations, and that will be the emphasis in this presentation. Okay. So, foremost, I think, yeah, in this case, are the designers and building professionals. Sila po yung, I think, may malaking say dito sa ating, ano po, sa ensuring that the principles of safe design constructions as well as expertise are applied, no? And making use of the proper methods of executing the works to create edifices that can resist earthquakes. So they also warrant that the project or works are in conformity with applicable codes, standards, and specifications. Okay. So for purposes of discussing the building code, no, so kailangan nating tignan anong klaseng factors kung pumapasok sa ating design and construction. No, so we can divide this into two, no. So you can classify this as uncontrollable factors and controllable factors, and makita nyo later on na yung distinction pala is very important dito sa pag design ng ating buildings and even sa implementation. So, what are uncontrollable factors, no? So, hindi po lahat ng aspects ng design construction pagdating diyan sa earthquake resilience can be foreseen, no? And even if foreseen, sometimes hindi may iwasan, no? So, they are therefore totally or partially beyond the reach of human skill and intervention. So, kahit na gaano pa kagaling tayo and then gaano kaganda yung ating design, may mga factors talaga na hindi natin kayang i-predict, no? So, nevertheless, we still have to take into consideration the same. No? So, regarding these uncontrollable factors, no, since they cannot be accurately predicted or avoided when contemplating this type of factors, one of the objectives of to design earthquake resistant structures is to mitigate the effects on the same. So, how do we do that? No, sometimes nahulog na siya talaga sa category ng force majeure because pagdating po sa ating mga failures, no, or mga untoward events, so we may have designed very well pero ang nangyayari there are just some events na hindi talaga natin kayang mapigilan, and they take the nature of force majeure or acts of God, no. So some examples of these uncontrollable factors affecting the design of earthquake resilient buildings are, first of all, location of fault lines. So actually yung fault lines na yan, that's part of the geology of our country, no, yung fault lines. And even though we have the choice to select many things, one of the things we cannot choose is the location of the fault lines, and we have to factor that into our design. Okay, second is the distance, frequency, duration, and severity of seismic events. And then geotechnical properties of the soil or strata under consideration as revealed by investigation, such as normal soil bearing capacity, that's one, and then the susceptibility of soil to liquefaction. So why are we discussing these things, no? Yung ano na to, yung mga uncontrollable factors. Kasi syempre, uncontrollable factors, we have to consider that in the design. We're going to take into account now how we are going to also minimize the effects of these uncontrollable factors. So let's discuss a bit about liquefaction, no? So this is also a soil liquefaction. Yeah, it's a phenomenon which occurs when a saturated or partially saturated soil substantially loses strength and stiffness in response to an applied stress, such as shaking during earthquake or other sudden change in stress condition, in which the material that is ordinarily solid behaves like liquid. So nakikita nyo po, minsan yung mga bumabagsak po natin na gusali, hindi po siya nasisira yung ano niya, yung integrity niya, but it's the soil itself, no, na nagiging parang liquid yung property niya. So, yung nangyayari, lumulubog po yung building completely, no, or partially. So, how do you mitigate the effects of the uncontrollable factors? So, there are still some ways na kaya natin siyang i-mitigate yung ano natin, yung undesirable effects of uncontrollable factors, no? So, first is legislative or executive action, enforcement, and stakeholder compliance and support. So, yung pinakauna talagang ginagawa natin dito to try to minimize the effect, no? So aside from studying that, we go from the top, no? So we have to acknowledge na talagang nag-i-exist tong mga factors na to, as well as the importance of mitigating it, no? And what we can do is to institutionalize policies or measures to this effect by passing appropriate laws, no? Administrative issuances, and expecting, of course, na i-comply po ng ating mga stakeholders. So once the aforementioned laws and regulations have been passed or issued, the proper regulatory or enforcement body ensures the execution thereof in order to achieve the stated goals of the same. However, for the said laws and regulations to have desired effect, stakeholders must still report in the faithful observance of the same. So, ano po yung example of action to reduce earthquake risk factors? Okay, declaration of danger areas, no builder hazard zones by law, ordinance, and regulations. No, so sa atin pong building code, no, tinitingnan po natin yung input ng other agencies. Baka po pag mag-apply tayo ng building permit for our structures, hindi pala pwedeng ilagay po dyan yung ating structure because it's already declared to be a danger zone. Okay? Okay, another one, mandatory requirement of soil testing for certain types of construction. Of course, annual safety inspection and monitoring. So, of course, you have to identify first the uncontrollable factors, for example, actual seismic events, no? And then you have to determine the aspect of building design or operation affected. Yan. Then the identification of the technical and legal basis, no? So, under the NBCP, we have to ensure that yung ating buildings follow the safe construction principle, no? So the continuation, no? So termination of the proper level of regulation. So excuse me, no? Ano ko muna to, i-minimize ko muna to. Okay. I think I have to move this at the side, no? Okay. So termination of the proper level of regulation. So kung kaya naman pong administrative regulation yung gawin, so wag na po tayong mag-insist na gawin siyang batas, no? So consultation, research, feedback from experts and stakeholders like building professionals, and then we adopt the recommendations and promulgate the appropriate law or issuance. So we have a memorandum circular, no, for instance, that came out a few years ago on earthquake recording instrumentation, and then of course there's an expected enforcement and compliance. So a bit about this memorandum circular. So we required certain kinds of buildings to install accelerometers and other recording instrumentation for earthquakes, no? So don't worry, no, hindi naman po covered yung residential dito as far as I know, kasi minimum po na height ng buildings na covered is 50 meters, and for ordinary stakeholders po yung ating mga houses hindi naman po ganyan kataas, no? So we're just discussing this because yung yung accelerometers, while they are not required to be installed sa houses, the data that they will provide, no, the information that it will give us will be of great assistance pagdating doon sa design ng buildings later on once we generate more information concerning earthquakes, kasi ang daming unknowns eh. Once we try to limit those unknowns, we'll have enough basis to make our designs better, no? So another thing that we can do is research and improvement of knowledge regarding future earthquake risk, such as studies conducted by academic institutions like DOST, PVOX, no? So another is the ones that we're doing right now, no? Yung dissemination of information to stakeholders such as public service announcements, seminars, bulletin boards, and posters in public places. Kasi po as you know, yung technical knowledge po dito sa ating sa ating earthquakes and the earthquake resilient design is not generally available to the public, no? So that's why we're holding this kind of seminars and information, no? And then ano po yung limitations ng knowledge natin, makikita din po natin yan, no? So these are some of the informations that disseminated, no? Now, for designers naman po, we design with assumptions allowing for contingency or uncertainty, such as introductions of factors of safety. No, so marami po tayong mga buildings na kung sasabihin natin po, medyo over-designed kasi nga may mga let's say predictions in the future na this will not be adequate, no, or even just allowance, no. So these are some examples of factors of safety. Now, let's go now to the controllable factors, no, and the corresponding governing laws, rules, and regulatory bodies involved. What we call controllable factors in earthquake resilient designs are those fully or partially affected by human agency and decision making. No, so, however, it doesn't mean that since uh, mas malaki yung ano natin dito, yung control po natin dito, we can just do whatever we want, no? The choices or options available to owners and designers to maximize their utility or degree of control over the same are not unlimited po. Please highlight this one. It's not unlimited. In some way or another, meron pong government regulations to serve an interest equal in importance to the protection of life and property. So the limitations imposed by the designer owner are no longer ano po siya, yung ating limitations no longer caused by extraneous factors but by regulations. Okay. So, if you're the owner of a property, no, so yung ano po natin, yung talagang instinct po natin is of course self-preservation. Sometimes wala tayong pakialam sa rights ng ating neighbors, but we still have the obligation to respect the property rights of adjoining owners, including the government, by not making the building too large so as to diminish the legal spaces or easement to which the latter is entitled. No, so merong aspects sa design that states that yung ano po natin, i-maximize po natin yung ano natin, yung property natin, and we're aware naman po na most of the property owners that we have don't have large land holdings, no? So hindi kahit saan siya pwedeng mag-select ng site in order to erect the structures. But at the same time, in order to limit these rights and to protect the rights of others, no? So merong mga controls na introduce po yung ano natin, yung rules and regulations, no? So I'll give some examples, no? Baka mag-away po yung mga ano natin, yung neighbors. So in the illustration that we have, no? So meron tayong dalawang bahay, no? And they all have an interest in, of course, protecting their property. But when you're designing it, you also have to consider anong effects ng design on the neighbors, no? So baka magkaroon ng encroachment po. So a good example for that is the article in the Civil Code on lateral and subjacent support, no? So baka po in the process of designing a very good foundation in earthquake-proof building, no, yung adjoining property po magko-collapse naman. So may obligation po yung ano natin, yung designers and of course the owners, the construction personnel involved to take into account po yung ano, yung weakness ng property on the other side of the fence. Baka mangyari dyan, magkakasuhan yung neighbors because in the process of strengthening your structure, magkukulapse naman yung sa kanila. So very common po to in cases where magkatabi po yung property. And this is something that designers and owners have to take into account. Actually, very common po na mag-away on this kasi alam po natin, no, minsan po yung ano natin, yung foundations po natin, no, kapag hindi natin tinignan ng maayos yung pagkakagawa, baka nag-encroach sa to ng properties ng neighbors. So whenever the depth, the excavation of construction is such that lateral and subjacent support of adjoining property or existing structure will be affected in a manner that the stability and safety of the same is endangered, the person undertaking or causing the excavation to be undertaken shall be responsible for expense of underpinning or extending the foundation or footings of the property or structure. So, in addition pala dun sa ano natin, sa ating own property, dapat tignan din po natin yung support ng magkatabing property. If ever that we have to excavate para ma-reach yung point na maganda yung ano yung strata or to improve the foundation, we have to also make sure na yung properties ng ating neighbors are not affected. So this is an example of the limitations of the controllable factors, no, pagdating dyan sa design. So another one, to employ only materials, specifications, or construction methods approved by the proper regulatory bodies, and not to use his own judgment over the same in a manner that circumvents the normal discretion which the said bodies are duty bound to exercise. So alam naman po natin, may maraming paraan para mag-strengthen ng building, pero at the same time po, kapag hindi po yun approved, no, wag po natin gawin, no, kasi even the methods of construction are also reviewed, no, by ating building officials. And of course, kung hindi po yan approved, no, even though it's a, like we could say in theory, it's a very good method, no. Yeah, the materials are very sound if they are not approved materials. So we should also exercise caution bago natin gamitin po. So, this applies whether or not ano po public or private buildings po. Subject po sa regulations po yung material specification and construction methods at makikita po natin yan sa code mamaya. So, good illustration po nito. So, there is a provision in the National Building Code requiring the first floor of a habitable multi-story building to have higher minimum ceiling height. That's 2.7 meters. So, makikita na po yan sa code of the succeeding story. So, kung mapapansin nyo minsan, kapag pumapasok tayo dyan sa mga buildings, mas mataas po talaga yung yung ground floor. No, so this is the reason legally speaking, no. Nire-require po na mas mataas yung ground floor compared dun sa ano po natin sa succeeding floors, no. So aesthetics, that's one factor, no, bakit ganyan. So it's only 2.4 and 2.10 yung succeeding floors. Mas mataas po yung minimum for the ground floor, no. So yung ano po diyan structurally, meron po yung potential to turn the first floor into soft story, a situation where due to necessarily greater length of the column supporting the floors, it has weaker resistance to lateral forces such as those generated by earthquakes compared to above story. So, imagine niyo po yung yung ano lang, yung column po na ano lang, na hindi masyadong mahaba, no. So, since it's not very slender, malaki yung ano niya, resistance niya compared to slender column. So, to show you illustration, no. Let's say etong yung mga stories above, shorter yung distansya ng floor to ceiling, no, compared to the first story. So magiging soft story po yung ano natin, yung ground floor kapag tinamaan po siya ng earthquake, baka mag-collapse, no. So another illustration. So magiging soft story po tong ano natin, yung first floor. And it has something to do with the law itself, no. So yan po yung mangyayari kapag may soft story ka. So titingnan niyo po yung principle po involved dito. If it's a short column, so there could be this kind of failure. If it's a long or slender column, magbabakol po siya. So this is an example of buckling, no. Baka mag-bend siya and then mag-break eventually because it's very long and very slender. And the ceiling height, the floor to ceiling height has something to do with that, no. So yung normal po natin na dito na reaction, of course, yung owner po natin magtitipid talaga, di ba? That's one consideration. But however, the owner cannot simply reduce the ceiling height of the ground floor to strengthen the first floor structurally, even if it's more economical, because the law already provides 2.7 po yung minimum natin. So, should he wish for the first floor to have comparable lateral strength to succeeding floors, he has to find an engineering solution that also complies with the code, no? So, he has to maintain the height of the first floor. So, some other things that he can do, he can raise the height of the other floor. So, pwede rin gawin yung 2.7 yung other floors, or to increase the strength of the structural supports of the first floor. Ibig sabihin lang po dyan, even though there are engineering solutions to ensure that the building does not to ensure that the building has the required strength, meron pong mga controls po or regulations, and makikita niyo po yan all over the building code, no. So baka ma-frustrate po yun sometimes yung ating mga may-ari. They want to save money, they want to maximize the use of their property while at the same time increasing the strength, but there are some restrictions, no? So ang ano po natin diyan, let's just think na hindi lang po yung safety is the only consideration of the building code, and you will see later on there are actually a lot of considerations that go into the code, no. So kung titingnan po natin, safety is foremost, no. So not necessarily, kasi marami pong factors kino-consider when it comes to design. So isang example po to yung soft story. So the same principle applies to the use of materials, specification or construction methods. So kung hindi po sila approved, no, again, they will not be allowed to be used. Kung hindi approve yung mga materials na yon, even though we can provide proof na studies have shown that this is actually better. So these are some things we should keep in mind. So what are examples of controllable factors? Okay, so we have the choice of location or building site. Although we cannot control, for example, yung mga fault lines kanina, we still have a choice of location or building site, no? Another is the adequacy of the design. As long as maganda po yung design natin, no? That's things that are under our control. Quality of materials is another. Then proper construction methods is another. Then appropriate quantities and specifications, proper use and timely inspection and maintenance, and then the competency of technical personnel. Lahat po ng to yung mga controllable factors, meron po yung corresponding regulations, no? And most of them are governed by the building code, no, when it comes to building design and construction. Now, pagdating naman po dun sa technical personnels, yung building code po natin, no? So I cannot discuss in detail lahat ng mga provisions na nandito for want of time, no? Pero yung building code po natin discusses ano po yung obligations ng ating technical personnel when it comes to building design, construction, maintenance, operation. So, some of the things na hindi po kontrolado ng ating building code when it comes to technical personnel are of course the qualifications, no. Hindi po lahat ng qualifications, mostly building code yung reference, no. It's the appropriate na professional regulation laws. So, when it comes to choice of location or building site, yung owner po natin has the responsibility to select the location or site for the building, assisted by geotechnical investigation, and subject to the requirements of NBCP and SIR on siting, orientation, developmental controls, such as floor area setbacks and building height. So, some of these developmental controls, so meron po tayong tinatawag na developmental controls that will be seen in the building code, no, and the IRR. So, yung po natin, yung site of the building. So although we can try to optimize that one, we have to keep in mind, like we mentioned before, hindi po lahat ng gusto natin pwede nating i-impose sa site, no. Yung building code po natin, meron pong ini-impose din na controls, no. So for example, hindi po lahat ng area can be completely used diyan sa site para gawing building, no. Meron din po tayong mga setbacks, mga footprints, height limitations and the like. So but still malaking bagay po to when it comes to determining earthquake resilience, yung choice of site. Yan. So some other considerations, this is actually very important, no? Not necessarily earthquake related. So meron ka ng idea kung saan mo ilalagay yung yung building mo, but still you need to show under the building code kung talaga bang may right ka to erect the building on that area. So meron ding limitations imposed by laws, ordinances and regulations. So pinaka-importante diyan, of course, magpakita ka ng title, no? So saka zoning regulations. Those are some things na pwede natin tignan. Baka yung site na selected mo hindi po pwede residential ilagay diyan, di ba? So another controllable factor, the adequate design. The building must incorporate the principles of safe construction to minimize the chances of failure of the structural components and to protect the occupants therein from damage caused by earthquakes, no? So, yung design po natin must actually be good enough so that it can withstand a certain amount of stress or forces coming from earthquakes. So, another factor that we can control is the quality of materials, no? The individual components of buildings must be tested, certified by the proper body, and selected before being properly incorporated of the works, no? Some of these durable materials used in building construction are load-bearing concrete hollow blocks, no? Portland cement, and deformed steel bars. So these are some examples of materials na meron po tayong mga standards for quality. So the use of good materials is general requirement. Please take note, general requirement po yan for all buildings under section 1201 of the revised implementing rules of the NBCP. So yung emphasis po natin dito is quality, characteristics, and properties. Although yung NBCP po, wala po siyang pinoprovide na detalye. Ano dapat yung dito? Yung mga qualities of materials, characteristics, they are also furnished by other regulations as well as reference standards. No, so other regulations pertinent to the construction materials quality are requirements of the Philippine National Standards. Meron po tayong PNS enforced by the Department of Trade and Industry. No, so yung mga certification for products, makikita po natin yan. So another controllable factor is proper construction method. No, the materials used must be incorporated into the works in such a way that the whole building is adequately supported and structurally sound. So meron kang magandang materials, but if the construction method hindi naman po maayos po, there might be a problem later on pagdating ng earthquake. Baka yung magkaka-failure po yung building, no? So there are several construction methods available for reference to the designer. For the government, meron po tayong tinatawag na meron po tayong standard construction methods for various items of work. Ang tawag po namin dyan informally is the blue book. Kasi color blue po yung yung itsura ng libro. That's volume 3 po for buildings. So nandyan po yung standards for building. So the private private constructors have the option to use the blue book as reference. for the buildings, no, building construction when it comes to standards. Another is appropriate quantities and specifications. So guesswork should be avoided or minimized when determining the right amount of materials to be used. That's why meron po tayong tinatawag na bill of quantities. No, so these are detailed estimates kung ano po yung gagamitin, and these are also based on scientific principles. Kung ilang concretes yung ilang bags of cement will be used, ilang steel bars, these are important considerations, no? So yeah, these are examples of materials in the desired quantities. Now, ano po yung specifications? These are precisely written documents that go with the construction documents and describe materials as well as installation methods. Now, the appropriate specification for each item of work, such as design strength and performance characteristics, nature and scope of work should be indicated. Sometimes nakikita nyo po to sa plano na sinasubmit to the building official for approval. And then may mga documents din po na talagang specifications nakalagay. No, so these are some examples, no. Ano po yung specifications. Now, the standard specifications na nasa blue book po namin govern the specifications of materials, quantities, and construction methods for public buildings. So may mga items po yan. For example, item 300, item 311. These are all indicated in the blue book kung paano po yan gagawin. So ano po yan, from time to time, in-update po ng ating department yan. And you're also free to use that as reference, no, for private constructors. So as the name implies, these are not mandatory for private buildings, yung mga items of work na sinasabi po natin, unless specified by contract. Now, builders or owners typically have more leeway over design, construction, and operations of their building compared to government or public sector. However, yung standard specification provides some parameters by which private builders may measure the adequacy of works comprising the building. Kasi naman po, yung ano po natin, yung nasa blue book po, talagang these are already studied and already indicated to be good quality, no? Now, the structural adequacy of the building is required by the local, is reviewed by the local building official with the assistance of the civil structural section. So, if you want na i-review po to, so when you apply for a building permit, kine-check po to ng ating local building officials. Now, additionally, in the future, it is intended that certain aspects of construction contracts for private infrastructure be standardized. So, baka po later on, we're actually doing some things para maging standard po yung construction contract, certain aspects of them, para magamit din po siya as a reference, and then at the same time, uniformity din po in enforcement, no? So, ano po yung legal basis but nagpapalabas po tayo ng specifications yung ating DPWH, no? So, that's Section 3, Chapter 1 of the Title 4, Book 4, of Title 5, Book 4 of the Administrative Code po to, EO number 292. So to carry out its mandate, the Public Works and Highway shall develop and implement effective codes, standards, and reasonable guidelines to ensure the safety of all, please take note, public and private structures in the country and ensure efficiency and proper quality of the construction of public works. Marami kasing nagtatanong po, covered ba po yung private dito pagdating sa standards? Actually, hindi siya necessarily yung ano po natin, yung specifications, hindi po namin ini-impose yan on the general public, but please take note yung ano po natin dito, yung guidelines po, and then the standards po to, these are actually already applicable to the public from a technical standpoint, not from a legal standpoint or from an enforcement standpoint, but from a technical standpoint, pwede na po siyang gamitin as reference, and this is the basis for that, no? So another factor that's within the control of the property owner, no, or the designers, proper use and timely inspection and maintenance. So the operator of a building should not use or convert it for purpose that it was not designed for. So makikita niyo rin po yan sa building code, no? Meron tayong specific use and occupancy. In fact, nakalagay po dyan most of the time kung ilan yung occupants, ilang tao yung dapat nandyan, di ba? So a building designed to carry the weight of 5 occupants and movable property, so yung mga furnitures, yung mga fixtures, should not be occupied by 20 simultaneously. At least makikita po natin mas malaki yung doon sa building, di ba? If you don't use the building properly, magkakaroon ng stress yan. And then there will be wear and tear. So pagdating ng lindol, baka magka-fail. And then to ensure that the building does not fail structurally, adequate maintenance such as refurbishing damaged members and inspection may be conducted. Baka sa kalumaan ng building, maybe we have buildings that are 50 years old, no? So yung ano po niya, yung life cycle ng building natin malapit na dun sa ano sa maintenance and or demolition or abatement, no? Or renewal. So ang gagawin po natin, we have to adequately check. We have to check for defects yung ano natin, yung building, conduct inspection kung pwede pa ba itong gamitin for that purpose. So yan. Sometimes it's not the design that's the problem. Sometimes it's the age of the structure, no? Then lastly, the competency of technical personnel. So design and execution of the works shall be under the direction of registered professionals. Nakalagay din po yan sa ating building code, no? And still technical personnel in order to ensure the quality and adequacy of the same. So such as civil engineers, structural engineers, etc. So makikita po natin during the implementation of during the planning rather uh, the planning stage of the building project. Yung bahay po natin, di ba? Nag-approach po tayo ng professionals. That's the usual way of doing it, no? And that's the proper way of starting the project. So we give our ideas, and then they also design around those parameters, no? So yung responsibility po ng ating professionals, of course, they sign the plans na i-approve po. During the construction stage naman po, it should be under the direction of a professional. Nakalagay din po yan sa building code, no? So that's also for the protection of the owners, the protection of the users of the building, no? So they are actually warranting the quality of the buildings. Yan. So controllable factors are regulated by laws, principally by National Building Code of the Philippines, no? So if you have the time, no, pwede niyo pong basahin po tong ano natin, National Building Code. So I can't discuss everything kasi this is a very lengthy technical and legal document, no? Pero there are provisions there that would let you see na talagang ano to, seryoso tayo pagdating dito sa controlling these factors of design for the protection of everyone, no? So just a short background on the building code. Yung original na building code po natin, that's RA 6541. That's circa August 26, 1972. So napalitan na po yan ng National Building Code of the Philippines or NBCP issued on Feb 19, 1977. So primarily enforced at the policy level by the DPWH and at the operational level by the building official. So most of the time kapag nagde-design po kayo ng building and then you're applying for a permit, mostly it's the personnel of the office of building officials na ni-interact po ng ating ano po ang tawag doon yung ano po natin ay interact natin mostly the personnel from the offices of the building official. Now, among the stated policies of the National Building Code of the Philippines is to safeguard life, health, property, and public welfare, consistent with principles of sound environmental management and control, and to this end, make it a purpose of the code to provide for buildings and structures. Please take note, ito po yung dinidiscuss natin earlier. Framework of minimum standards and requirements to regulate and control location, site, design, quality of materials, construction, use, occupancy, and maintenance. Now, all buildings or structures as well as accessory facilities shall conform in all respect to principles of safe construction and must be suited to the purpose for which they are designed. So yun. So like I mentioned kanina, hindi lang po yung safety from earthquake yung consideration. Meron din po tayong these other factors, environmental protection, aesthetics. Dapat maganda din po yung building, hindi mukhang hindi siya parang eyesore, di ba? Then of course the economy, construction, and the speed, no. So these are some of the principles na naka-enshrine sa ating batas and in construction practice. So some of the things na pwede nating discuss pa rin, no? So we still have the time. The land or site upon which the building will be constructed or constructed any building or structure or auxiliary facility shall be sanitary, hygienic, or safe. So in case of sites or buildings intended for use as habitation, yung sinasabi nating residential buildings, it shall be a safe distance as determined by authorities from streams or bodies of water or sources of air considered polluted, but more relevantly ito, volcanic site, and possibly hazard zones, no? Any other building considered to be a potential source of fire and explosion. So selection of land or site, actually malaking factor po yan in ensuring na safe po yung natin, yung building natin from earthquakes, no? So let's discuss more on residential buildings. Now under the NBCP, According to use and on occupancy, residential houses are classified as Group A, residential dwellings. Kanina, we heard the classification of structures based on the materials used. Now, we're talking about the legal classification of structures, kung saan siya nahuhulog doon sa regulations. So, residential structures, marami pong types to. So, we have very elegant houses. Meron po tayong mga socialized economic houses, di ba? Then we have smaller structures. Meron tayong mga lumang mga buildings. But they're all classified kung if they're being used as a residence or tirahan po. So, they're considered as Group A residential dwellings. So, dalawa pong klase yan. Division 1, residential buildings or structure for the exclusive use of single-family occupants, including school or company staff housing, single or nuclear family dwelling. So, huwag nating basahin tong the rest. No? Let's focus on this Division 1, structures for exclusive use of single-family occupants. Yeah, single-family occupants, okay? Now, we also have another kind of residential, yung ano to, non-leasing occupants at exceeding 10 persons. So, medyo malaki-laking mga bahay to. So, let's focus on the division 1. No? We also have division A1, residential buildings or structures for exclusive use of single family occupants. Yan. Mga maliliit na bahay, no? Then, residential buildings for the exclusive use of non-leasing occupants not exceeding 10. Medyo malaki-laking bahay. Again, counting the number of occupants. So, ano po yung mga pertinent building permit application documents natin? So, kung nakikita niyo po, yung ano po natin, yung isang main concern ng ating building code is to ensure na pag-apply pa lang natin sa permit, na-covered na po yun yung safety ng building natin. No, so what's pertinent pagdating doon sa earthquakes, no? So skip tayo doon sa civil or structural documents because these are the documents that really check pagdating doon sa earthquake safety. So site development plan, it shows the technical description, boundaries, orientation, and position of proposed non-architectural horizontal structures such as sewerage treatment plants. So actually marami to. No? In relation to the lot, existing proposed access road, and driveways and existing public utilities and services. So ito, this is an example of a site development plan. Medyo maliit siya pero I hope it's visible. No? Then, very important for earthquake safety, no? Structural plans. We have foundation plans and details at scale not less than 1:100. No? So, syempre, malaking bagay po to kung gaano katibay yung ating pundasyon ng building. So, dapat may reflect siya sa structural plans. And then, also the floor and roof framing plans and details. So, it's not just the foundation yung important. Meron din po tayong dapat na malakas na supports pagdating dun sa floors, roofs, and other structural members. No? Then, the details and schedules of structural and civil work elements, including for deep wells, water reservoir, pipelines, and sewer systems. And now, for all buildings and structures, except for one-story and single detached buildings with total floor area of 20 meters or less, kailangan po tayong mag-submit ng structural analysis and design. So, dapat ipakita po natin na talagang matibay po yung natin, yung selection of members, selection of yung materials, so yung po natin, yung design and how they will react or interact with the kapag may naka-apply na force or earthquake loads. Then, boring and load tests are required for 3-story structures or higher. So, kung mataas yung residence mo, kailangan po natin ng boring test, no? And if necessary, load test. So, yung boring test and load test will be checking the capacity of the soil or strata, no, to bear the necessary weight. So, malalaman din po natin dyan sa ating boring and load test kung gaano kaganda ba yung natin, yung soil that will be the continuum from which ilalagay natin yung foundation natin. In accordance with the applicable latest approved provision of the National Structural Code of the Philippines. Ito po yung isang reference na ginagamit natin sa building code. Yung National Structural Code of the Philippines, will be discussing a bit of this later. So parang naubos na tayo ng time. I'll just hurry up, no? However, adequate soil exploration, including boring, load test shall be also required for lower buildings kung meron po tayong geological or geotechnical hazard. So kung malapit po yung source natin, malapit po yung Yung for example, malapit po yung fault lines, pwede din po tayong i-require ng boring and load test even though hindi po siya 3-story. Now, yung ano po, yung uh, written report of the civil geotechnical engineer, including but not limited to design bearing capacity, i-include din po natin sa ating application, as well as the result of the test. It shall be submitted with the other requirements. No, so maganda pong i-prepare na po natin yan when we're applying for the building permit. So seismic analysis, sometimes kailangan po to, no, kung ano po yung behavior ng building kapag may specific na kinds of earthquake na dumadating. Okay. Seismic analysis and of course other related documents. So another thing na ating i-keep in mind, no, is the excavation of footings, foundation for houses. Yan. So the footings and foundations shall be of appropriate type, adequate size and capacity in order to safely sustain superimposed loads under seismic or any condition of external forces that may affect the safety of the structure. It also be the responsibility of the architect and our engineer to adopt the type and design of the same in accordance with the standards set by the secretary. So kukontin lang po yung discussion natin ngayon. No, so meron po tayong additional references dito, RA 10121, which is the strengthening of the Philippine disaster risk reduction and management system and providing for national disaster risk reduction management framework. No, so meron din po tayong for the information of everyone, no, actually hindi pa to batas, pero meron po tayong Philippine Building Act uh, being discussed by Congress right now. Mag-i-impose po siya ng tinatawag natin na Build Back Better. So para po sa atin dito na nawala ng tirahan or nagpa-demolish ng ating mga tirahan, not just by reason of natural disasters but voluntarily, no, we're required to build back better. So mas maganda dapat yung gagawin natin compared to the original. So those are some principles na makikita natin in the future, no. Now, this one, the National Structure Code of the Philippines or NCP. So, tinawagan ko po yung Association of Structural Engineers of the Philippines. Actually, proprietary po to. So, sad to say, marami po tong helpful information, no. This is one of the references sa po natin. One of the references na ginagamit ng ating building code, and it has a lot of information. Maraming mga formula po dito na makikita ninyo. Marami po tong details na dinidiscuss on how to strengthen yung structure. So unfortunately, hindi ko to pwedeng i-discuss right now, aside sa medyo voluminous siya, and then we have a lot more competent and qualified na personnel that can pour over the individual lines. Din po to kasi this is actually proprietary yung po natin NCP, although you can purchase yung copies po ninyo at the ASEP po. So they're the official distributors po dito. So for your information, approved po to as a referral code ng NBCP yung National Structural Code. So this is actually a very good reference for additional information on how to strengthen the building. So actually dito na po natatapos yung yung PowerPoint natin, but before we leave siguro, no, before we finish, I'd like to show you some things. So, meron pong akong resources dito. Actually, wala po tayong tinatawag na formal kind of building audit, no? Or parang parang naka issuance po na talagang sinusunod. Pero to give you some idea, so I've taken the liberty of using some of the forms that we have in the office. Meron po tayong tinatawag na safety assessment form. So medyo kulang po tayo ng time to discuss all of this. But po to? Parang it's a kind of it's a way of determining kung gaano ka safe yung po natin yung mga buildings, no. So actually we have several more. Marami po tayong mga ginagamit dito, no. Inspection of concrete structures. So this is the one, no, for concrete structures. Then masonry structures, meron din po tayo. So diniscuss po yun kanina, di ba, yung types of structures. So may mga po tayo dito, some useful information, then inspection procedure. Yan. It's not actually what do you call that, a kind of actually bridges na to, hindi na to siya sa sa building. ASEP inspection of lifeline structures.
Attorney, are you projecting your references? What we can see is the end of your slide.
Ano po ma'am? Ano po again?
Pinapakita niyo po yung dinidiscuss niyo na references. Ang nakikita po ngayon sa screen it's the end of the previous of your presentation.
Okay. Okay. Sige.
Yes, yes.
Okay, what can you see now?
I can see wala pa pong naka-project na
Right.
reference.
Saglit lang ha. Okay, all right. How about now?
Yes, I can see I think it's your desktop. Yes.
All right. So
There.
next, we have some forms. Okay. Actually, kung makikita nito, this is for use by technical personnel. Oh, yan. So, ito another. Meron tayong form. But actually, these forms belong to ASEP, no? Yan. Okay, what else? We also have inspection of masonry structures. So, I'm using this fairly, no? Kasi sinasabi ko naman, ano, yung may-ari po dito, who's the owner of this, gagamitin po to siya during the inspection of buildings. Parang ano siya, parang methodology siya. Yan. Ito mostly bridges and highways, but I think yung ano po natin, yung associates po natin diyan sa ASEP, no. They have a complete set of forms for inspection of buildings. To be honest po, hindi po siya ano ang tawag doon. Hindi po to sinasabi natin a formal set of guidelines or a complete set of guidelines na standard for all buildings, no. Yan. Hello?
Yes, attorney.
Okay, so I think that's the
Attorney,
presentation.
okay po. Meron pong request from our participants. Will you be sharing those references to us? May question po.
I have to ask muna, no. Well, I can
Okay.
tell you na ano siya, they exist yung ano, yung mga forms na yon. Yung what I'm not sure right now actually is kung ano ba, kung may right ba kami to ano to disseminate this at this venue, di ba? Yung ano, yung mga forms. Baka ano siya, baka proprietary siya on the part of asset, no. So we have to check first.
Okay, thank you so much, attorney.
Okay, so thank you so much, DPWH, through Attorney John Alexander Balderol. Again, sir, thank you very much. We really appreciate your time and inputs you have shared to us, specifically on the building codes and the national structure building code of the Philippines. So again, thank you very much. So one thing's for sure, and we've learned from you, is that kailangan we really have to consult with the experts, especially in our specific municipality. Since we have our building officials, we can tap them for us to be guided with the guidelines and laws prior to building our houses or other structural buildings that we've planned to build. Okay, partner?
We would like to remind everyone kasi we will be moving on to our question and answer. Sana na-post na po ninyo ang inyong mga questions sa inyong Menti link. Partner, may favorite ka bang part nitong this is our third day actually, and I'm really happy to be part of this, and I think a lot of our participants are also feeling the same way as I am. Alam mo ba, yung day one natin na means live streaming, dumami ng dumami yung views niya from, I think that was 57. Now, we already have like, nung sinilip ko siya, nasa 472 views na. Yung day 2 naman, as of kanina, that's 345 views, samantalang nasa 50 talaga yung regular natin na napapanood. So, I think some of our participants have their favorite topics, or they might be sharing the live streaming link, which all of our participants can do. So, ini-encourage namin yung lahat. Back to my question, do you have a favorite topic sa day 1 to 3 natin?
Of course naman, partner. Thank you again para sa mga participants natin na nag-continue to access yung mga recorded natin na videos for this learning event. So actually, partner, with your question, I am so much delighted in learning the basic information about earthquake. More on sa difference ng magnitude and intensity, kasi minsan nalilito din tayo kahit paulit-ulit natin siyang parang maganda rin na meron tayong refreshment. And then how to track hazards and faults in your area using the How Safe is My House tool. And di ba merong dalawang present sa atin si Engineer Angel, yung fault
Hazard
finder,
finder?
yung
Fault
fault
finder.
finder at saka yung hazard something, yung dalawang applications na yon wherein we can access that, and then we will know kung ano yung mga hazards and fault lines na meron tayo within our area. And look at the past earthquake events at kung gaano nakakatakot yung effect nito. At the same time, exciting siya kasi meron tayong additional knowledge on how to mitigate naman yung impact ng mga earthquake na hopefully wala naman, pero since parang nasa tayo, maraming fault lines, so we expect, so gaya ganun, partner. Ano yung sayo naman? Ano yung mga parts? Ako kasi sa day 1 yun eh. Meron ka ba sa day 1 na striking para sa'yo?
Ako yung day 1, mukhang yung How Safe is My House din. Kasi mahalaga yung access ng ating mamamayan sa information. And maganda yung How Safe is My House kasi parang self-assessment siya. Sa bahay mo mismo, you can assess if your house is parang malakas or can withstand earthquake events. So very important yun. Day 2, mas gusto ko yung mga topics because pagkatapos ng day 1 na ihanda na ako, yung pinakagusto ko sa day 2, yung strengthening of houses constructed with other materials. Kasi marami tayong low-income communities across the country. So parang napakaganda nung topic. Hindi siya, although may technical terms,
Yes.
pero naipaunawa sa atin ng maayos.
Meron kasi consider kasi nila yung economic aspect ng ating mga participants, and then they have our speakers presented ng mga materials other than concrete materials na magiging affordable siya, and then how to construct them para maging mas safer yung construction ng structure. For example, sinabi dun sa day 2, parang it's very significant talaga no use of correct materials or standard materials. Tapos magpa-design ng houses natin properly through consulting our experts, engineers, tapping our city and municipal engineers na available. Tapos and of course, proper construction. Palagi yung inulit-ulit siya. Parang naririnig ko siya from day 1 until day 2 up to this day na kailangan maging maging alerto, maging aware sa mga materials na gagamitin natin, sa guidelines, sa laws na susundin natin to ensure our safety. Di ba, partner?
Yes, and I think because meron na tayong mga favorites, of course, ngayon namang araw na to, marami din ang excited na magtanong sa ating mga resource persons. Sana nakahanda na yung ating mga resource persons kasi magpo-proceed na tayo sa ating open forum. We hope that you have already posted your questions in our Menti board. What we will be doing is we will be reading the questions naka-mount na po siya sa PowerPoint presentation. Thank you for our team for putting it up together. At sa mga questions, syempre, na galing sa ating participants. Okay, so let's get ready for the questions. Okay, ang unang katanungan natin ay para kay Engineer Angel Lanuza. So, ang question po galing sa ating audience, Engineer Angel, is, mandatory po ba sa lahat ng city and municipality ang paggamit ng tool kagaya po ng EDM at REDAS para po matulungan na magkaroon ng maayos na database ang mga LGUs at barangay? For Engineer Angel Lanuza po, yung first question. Engineer? Nandito na ba si Engineer Angel?
Naman po, pero medyo putol-putol ma'am yung naging mahana.
Sige po, let's just try to muna.
Kaya
Okay.
ako.
Yes, Engineer, naririnig po namin. Alright, so while fixing the internet connection of Engineer Angel Lanuza, so i-pause muna natin yung question niya. Shout out lang po muna sa ating mga different offices ng CRS around the Philippines. So meron po tayong shout out po sa ating mga offices in Catarman, Northern Samar. Our head of office there is Sir Julius Oliveros.
Sa atin din po mga kasamahan sa CRS Davao, magandang umaga sa inyong lahat, and thank you so much for viewing and supporting this event.
Again, thank you also to our CRS sub-office in Tacloban.
Of course.
Sana po ay nakatutok po tayo ngayon, yes.
And of course, ang ating team na ang CRS Philippines Manila Office. Magandang umaga sa inyo dyan sa opisina. At sa lahat, kahit po yung mga nasa field who are tuned to our webinar. Okay, so we will have questions for Attorney John Alexander Belderol. Attorney, sana ready ka na. So the first question, bakit po kaya napasama sa force majeure ang liquefaction kung mayroon namang hazard map at required na borehole information? So merong mga soil boring test na ginagawa, required siya, pero bakit daw po napasama sa force majeure ang liquefaction? Attorney John? Do you have Attorney John on the line?
Mukhang parehas kami nagkakaproblema sa
sa internet.
Also, siguro while waiting for Attorney John Belderol, balikan na lang muna natin yung unang tanong for Engineer Lanuza.
Sige po.
Sige.
Okay. Ano yung question na yun, partner?
The first question, can we pull up the first question?
Kung mandatory po yung exposure database survey, yan ang intindi ko.
Yes.
No? Tama. For now po, hindi. Hindi siya mandatory for all the local government units. No? But what we do po ay ipinararamdam natin po sa lahat ng mga LGUs po yung significance of having the database. No? Kasi yun po, doon po sila nagsisimula for planning planning for disaster management, planning for anumang mga dapat na tinatayong mga houses po, no? Yung mga numbers na yon. Tapos po, yun din po sa mga numbers sa impact result din, yun din po yung magtuturo sa kanila where are the location of the buildings that to be strengthened, that to be retrofitted, yung ganun po. So simply ang answer po is hindi pa po siya mandatory sa ngayon. But then again, we try to encourage all of the local government units na sana po ay magkaroon po sila ng kanilang exposure database through the use of EDM and other tool being provided by FIVOLX. Thank you.
Thank you, Engineer. Yeah. So hopefully naman sooner or later maging ano na siya, maging mandatory para mas magkaroon tayo ng mas malakas na na tool in order to measure yung mga vulnerability curves na magkakaroon tayo sa ating mga LGUs.
Siguro we are
Thank
ready for
you.
the next question. Ano-ano pong mga paraan pa ang ginagawa ng national government para mapaigting ang implementation ng mga tools kagaya po ng EDM at REDAS upang matulungan ang mga local government unit?
Well,
Engineer?
I can speak only on behalf of Feebox. Ang sa amin nga ay yung encouraging all the local government units and ipakita sa kanila po yung kahalagahan of having this and yung sa exposure database. Kasi nga makita po nila yung significance of having the result coming from this database ay doon sila po nagsisimula para magplano po. Sabi ko, number one, in terms of yung mga short-term planning, disaster management, no? Long-term planning, yung identification of these mga vulnerable houses and vulnerable people sa lindol para po mapagtuunan po ng pansin locally. So, challenge nga po doon sa training madalas kong tanungin, ang mga local government unit, paano po ba talaga sila nakakapagplano kung butas-butas po yung kanilang database within their locality. So far, yun po yung ginagawang effort. And then, recently po, ay parang tinanggap na po ng Philippine Statistic Authority, yun pong isang question, similar po to sa EDM tool, na to be included po doon sa questionnaire po sa PSA data or NSO data po na medyo magli-link po doon sa output naman ng EDM. It's for all the local government units po, lahat po ng effort na ito. Thank you.
Thank you po, Engineer. So sa ngayon, pagpapaunawa sa ating mga LGUs and also parang advocacy work na din. And at the same time, tuloy-tuloy po yung technical assistance na ibinibigay ninyo, Engineer, ng inyong opisina. Hindi lamang sa mga lokal na gobyerno, kundi pati po sa mga partners kagaya po sa amin, sa
Tama.
CRS, na mayroong mga projects with local government units na patungkol sa earthquake risk assessment and disaster risk reduction and management. So yan po yung mga ginagawa. Maganda rin pong may effort to mainstream the data collection. Kagaya nga po nung pag-include ng mga questions na iyan sa data collection mismo ng Philippine Statistics Authority. Our third question, can we pull up the third question? Yan. Ang sabi dito, we were fortunate enough to have undergone a REDAS seminar in 2016. Mukhang taga-LGU po itong ating nagbigay ng katanungan. How can we be able to update our REDAS software, please? Ayan, yan po yung tanong, Engineer.
Okay. Actually po, maganda sana malaman kung anong LGU yan. Pero tingin ko parang CRS yan CRS badge yan 2016. Para malaman po. Kasi at the end of every training of REDAS po, binibigay po lahat po nung link on how to update. No? Yun yung pinaka-last part ng training natin ng REDAS, kung paano po mag-update. And kung hindi na po ninyo natandaan, you can always send email to Yusek Solidum or through Ma'am Leonila Bautista para po sa mga update. And Vivox naman, since we have already provided you all these tools, I very much willing naman po, of course, to give you all the updates. Just contact Vivox po.
Okay, salamat po, Engineer, doon. So, maaari po sila makipag-ugnayan sa Feebox sa pamamagitan po ni Yusek Solidum or kay Madam Bautista through an email para ma-update. Okay, sige po. The fourth question, partner, can you read the fourth question?
Okay, so fourth question po natin is, doon po sa vulnerability criteria in terms of the damage percentages, ilang seconds o minutes po yung ground shaking?
Okay po. Doon po sa vulnerability criteria po, hindi na po natin pinag-uusapan dyan yung ilang minutes. No? Base na po yan doon sa intensity at saka po doon sa exposure or sa, Yung exposure po sa madaling salita, kung ano pong building type, saan materials ginawa yung ano mo, para baka akala natin yung distance sa fault po yung exposure. That's simply the type of the building po, no? Yun ang ibig natin sabihin when I speak exposure. So hindi na po natin pinag-uusapan doon yung minutes, but to give you an idea po, yung 1990 earthquake po, sobrang daming naging damage noon, ano? It took us only 45 seconds. So how much more if it is 1 minute? Even siguro sa mga highly engineered structures, it will be affected na pagka lumagpas na ng a minute po yung ground shaking.
Maraming salamat nun, engineer. I think ito na ba yung last question? Ay, meron pa po palang ibang klaseng mga questions. In relation to construction, considered po ba na shear wall ang load-bearing CHB? Then all holes will be provided with steel bars and filled with 3,000 PSI concrete. Yan po yung tanong natin. Medyo technical din.
Hindi, sige. Papadaliin natin. Ang shear wall kasi is, nabanggit ko kanina, para siyang poste ang principle. No. Buhos na pader yun. Ibig sabihin, may kasamang reinforcement. Pero may target tayo nga na PSI o yung pagiging matigas ng wall na yon, no? Na mag-a-act siya parang poste. Hindi ko po memoryado ang required PSI for shear wall, no? But I don't think kung yung pong hollow blocks pa rin yung ginamit mo, tapos although pinuno mo na siya ng bakal, yung pagkakasama-sama kasi nung fill materials nun, hindi siya nag-a-act as one. Ang principle of the reinforced concrete din po kasi ang shear wall Pagka tinimpla mo siya, pag nag-solidify siya, dapat it will act as one. So, for the hollow blocks, of course, meron pa yung mga in-between na part ng hollow blocks. So, hindi siya, for me hindi siya reinforced concrete kung tawagin. So, parang hindi po. For me, ang initial sagot ko dyan, hindi po siya considered as shear wall, yung maraming bakal at saka well-filled na CHB. Thank you.
Nasagot po ni engineer yung ating katanungan. Surprise din ako. Siguro engineer or din ang nagtanong po sa atin. Meron pa po bang katanungan for Engineer Lanusa? Meron pa pong isa. Partner, ikaw na ang magtanong nitong pangsunod na tanong.
Yes, so, yung actually, nakikinig ako kay engineer, tinatry ko siyang i-decipher kung, ganun ba? So yung ating next na tanong is, meron po bang recommended or standard na type or klase na wood or hardwood para hindi madaling maanay?
Honestly, wala akong alam. Parang hindi ko to masagot, pero based on experience, yung mga may mga kahoy talaga na lapitin ng anay, no? And I am not sure kung ito po ay nakasaad din sa building code, no? Sa ngayon po, hindi ko po to masasagot. Maaring sa ibang guidelines po ito makikita, no? Tungkol sa anay.
Okay, thank you, engineer. May tanong pa po ba for Engineer Angel Lanuza?
I hope nasasagot ko po, ha?
Mukhang yan na yata yung last question sa ngayon na nakapost kung wala pang papasok ulit for Engineer Lanusa. I think we can proceed to the next set of questions.
Yes,
kay Attorney
kasi anyway, yung mga questions na na meron pa, darating pa, pwede naman natin siyang i-park at saka gawin natin yung mga sagot, i-coordinate natin kina engineer. So our next set of questions is for Attorney John Alexander Belderol. I hope Attorney is still here. He's still here.
Dito ako.
So yung unang question po natin for Attorney, bakit po kaya napasama sa force majeure ang liquefaction kung meron naman hazard map and required borehole information?
Right, so the legal definition kasi ng force majeure, no? Ano po siya, no? it cannot be foreseen. That's the first definition. Second, it can be foreseen pero ano siya, it has an element of inevitability. So ano siya, parang kahit alam mo na there might be times na hindi mo siya may iwasan. Ngayon, okay, nilagay po natin yan sa in dividing po yung mga possible inputs dito sa design. We put that under uncontrollable factors kasi po that's something that's present already at the site before any engineering intervention, before any investigation was undertaken. Parang ano siya, nire-reveal lang po ng ating investigation na which is actually a kind of an intervention, no? Nire-reveal ng ating investigation na meron pong tendency yung ating soil to behave in that manner kapag may earthquake, no? So although we can say na uncontrollable factor siya, we can actually mitigate this impact by the proper engineering intervention. So pupunta po tayo doon sa ating design. If the owner or the designer still decides to implement the project or to continue the building, no, despite knowing na na meron siyang tendency yung soil to undergo liquefaction once the earthquakes, no. Yung po diyan, yung punta naman po tayo dun sa what is controllable, no. So kontrolado po ng ating property owner yung site and the proper design, no. So even though the soil has that kind of tendency, no, there can be engineering interventions in order to reduce the likelihood na yung po natin, yung building po natin would suffer damage from the earthquake, no, even though it's erected in site na meron pong possibility of liquidation. So for me, no, we can consider that as a kind of an uncontrollable factor, yung tendency, not the liquefaction itself, because yung liquefaction po, nangyayari po yan by a number of factors, no? But the fact na yung soil may ganyang klaseng tendency, that's not something that we can control, although we can reduce the likelihood of failures during design by the appropriate engineering interventions, by proper selection of the site, and by other things that we can control. No, so there are so many things that we can do, but the characteristic and properties of the soil, we could count that as something that's not controllable.
Okay,
Okay,
so
maraming salamat po dun sa sagot. Nasabi po niya na hindi naman po natin hindi tayo helpless in that situation. Although na-explain niya po kung bakit force majeure ang liquefaction, pero magagawa naman po ito ng pamamaraan ng mitigation strategy sa pamamagitan ng proper engineering techniques, yung design sa pag-develop ng site. So there you go, yun po yung sagot ni Attorney Jan. For our next question, partner.
our next question is, pag single story made of masonry or zocalo with wood, kailangan pa bang mag-apply ng building permit for construction? Ano po ang nakasaad sa batas? Haba. Sub-questions to, no? Okay.
Yes. Okay. Thank you for that question. Kasi actually, I didn't think I would get the opportunity to discuss a little bit more of the building code. Kasi yung orientation naman po ng ating series right now is more on really strengthening the structures, and this is more on general discussion sa building code, no. So na-discuss po kanina yung mga types of structures, no, when it comes to construction. Ang nakalagay po sa ating code, any kind of building, no, so to elaborate, any kind of building construction po, kailangan po talaga ng building permit. Exceptions, yung tinatawag po nating traditional and indigenous, that's the first one. Naka-define po yun kung magkano yun. I think it's a very measly amount of 15,000 pesos. Pero yung po dyan, yung amount is intended to be raised, no, once the Philippine Building Act is passed sometime this year or maybe next year, yung po natin, yung Philippine Building Act. Hindi na po siya magiging 15,000. It will be an amount that will be determined, no, by the government. No, so baka makabarred to yung yung masonry and zocalo with wood. Pero unfortunately, yung titingnan natin dito kung makuhulog ba to sa ating definition ng traditional indigenous construction, no. So parang hindi siya pwede. Now, the possible second exception dito is for socialized housing. Now, kung titignan po natin, talagang kailangan man po ng permit talaga for construction. Ang nakasabi lang po ng code natin, hindi lahat ng provisions applicable for economic and socialized housing. I think that's a Ilono on intended to alleviate yung ano po natin yung situation ng ating mga countrymen na hindi masyadong makakapag afford ng a lot of regulatory fees. No, so my answer to that one, if it's single story made of masonry or Zocalo wood, it still needs to apply for a building permit. No, construction. It doesn't mean na simple lang yung construction and then it's single story, exempted po siya. Yun lang pong dalawang categories right now ang masasabi nating there's a likelihood that they will not be going through the rigorous process sa building permit, no? Yung ano po, yung traditional indigenous family dwellings and then yung socialized housing. Now for socialized housings, meron din pong mga ano natin diyan, mga conditions, no? Medyo mas relax lang ng konti yung batas because it's set in the law na meron siyang sariling standards, no? Pero pagdating naman po sa permit, I think yung ginagawa po ng ating mga building officials, some of these applications hindi po on a per building basis, but kung malaki yung site, there's one big permit for several kinds of several buildings, no. So meron din po tayong anong tawag doon, some kind of remedial measures for that one. But I think the general rule would be it's not exempted. Kailangan ng building permit. Actually po, in this jurisdiction, yung building permit po covers a lot of things, no, and yung sa tingin natin very simple lang po yung gagawin, even repairs, no, covered din po ng permit except if it's really minor yung mga repairs. Nandun naman po yung standard sa ating revised IRR. Pero but to answer the question, kailangan po siya ng building permit, no, regardless if it's anong klaseng construction po, no. Now, sub question number 1, what is the penalty or ground na mangyayari pag may negligence na papatay ng building pag naapektuhan yung kalapit na property? Well, actually it depends, no. Kanina yung ano po, I would answer this in the context siguro na earthquake kasi ano naman po yung pinag-uusapan natin dito, earthquake. No? So we've discussed kanina ano yung mangyayari kapag may encroachment, kung yung foundation mo naka-affect dun sa sa property ng owner mo during excavation. So you have to support the structure na na-affected kung kaya pang remedyahan, and to of course repair the damage, no. So pagdating naman po sa negligence ng owner na nagpatayo ng building, no, if affected yung kalapit na property, let's say let's just limit this siguro, no, kapag collapses due to earthquake, no, kasi this is marami pa tayong pwedeng i-discuss under this subject, no, or under this query. So if it is the owner that causes the damage, generally kasi yung ano natin diyan, yung safety po natin diyan, if we're the owner, meron po tayong designer, no, na designer or design professionals, construction professionals. So mas maganda kasi yon na na hindi lahat ng decisions po natin yung naging factor, no. So ang nakikita ko lang dito, possible na na time na siguro na papasok tong negligence ng owner if masyadong malaki yung influence na dito sa sa ating construction, no. Kasi to be honest, that's the reason why we have professionals, competent professionals to also apply their knowledge dito para para despite the unknowns po, or the things na tawag dito na hindi natin maiwasan gawin, meron pa rin pong guidance or mayroong professional intervention, or there's this parang parang safety net, no, para sa atin. Now if it's directly the negligence of the owner, hindi naman po yung professionals, there would be he would have to pay damages dito sa ating may-ari. Of course that's something na kailangan yung i-prove, at saka kung nag-engage naman po ng professional yung may-ari natin, no, so they can easily shift the burden dun sa sa nag-design ng building, and then yung contractor, if there's a contractor. So ano po yung governing provision dito? So if in that kind of situation where there's an owner, there's a contractor, there's a designer, yung liability po dito is governed by the civil code. I think it's article 1726 yata, or 17225. Nakalagay po diyan kung sino yung may responsibility kapag naka-damage po yung building, no, ng other ng adjacent property, and as well as the general civil law, nakalagay po yan yung responsibilities ng owner of the building kapag naka-damage po siya ng property ng other persons, no, or even somebody died because of the failure of the building due to negligence. So pero I think in this case kasi yung kung design yung pinag-uusapan natin, mas malaki po responsibility ng ating contractor at saka ng ating ng ating design professionals compared to the owner. No, so that's the second question. No. Now, second sub question rather. If a homeowner makes improvement to his dwelling to accommodate boarders or renters but did not secure the necessary approval permits, additional floor rooms, in the event of an earthquake and in case there's casualty, will the homeowner be liable for damages, casualties? Okay, now, if is the yung atin pong operator, like we mentioned before, they're one of the persons, no, with the role to play in terms of making the building safe. No, so kailangan po ng approval permit. Pero hindi naman siya, it's not because of lack of approval permit that will be the basis for liability. It's just the fact na it's the fact na talagang in this case hindi niya ginawa yung lahat ng mga kaya niya, yung diligence niya to ensure na magkakaroon ng magkakaroon ng safety for the owner. So it's not actually the building code that's the basis of the liability. Yung liability niya dito is the fact na wala siyang kinuhang permit during the expansion. The expansion or to make the occupant to change the occupancy, no. So meron siyang liability under the building code. It's a civil it's an administrative fine liability and possibly a criminal liability. But for the civil liability for damages and casualties, we have to go back to the civil code, no. So dalawa po yung basis ng liability niya dito. For the non-securing of the permit, he could face the administrative or criminal liability for violation of the building code. And then for the actual damages caused to the for the boarders, renters, or to other persons, he will face the civil liability under the civil code. No, so those are the basis for the liability of the property owner.
Maraming salamat po dun sa mga naging kasagutan, Attorney Judd. Talagang kayo na nagbasa ng mga questions, and I think we did learn a lot from the answers provided to us. Nai-stress po talaga yung kahalagahan ng pagsunod sa
Yes.
building code to secure the necessary permits, even the civil and maybe yung
I can say
criminal
about the
liabilities that
building
will
code.
arise from that.
Yung building code po natin, it's not really unnecessarily harsh naman po kasi marami na po tayong pinagbigyan before na let's say natapos na nila yung yung construction nila, and then later on they decided na parang hindi tayo nag-follow ng rules, no. So what can we do about it? Sa totoo lang, no, they can still approach the office of the building official, and then anong tawag dito, yung po natin building code is curative naman po. Hindi naman po ipapademolish yan kapag maayos yan and it conforms to the code. Kung yung problema lang is walang permit na kinuha. So of course there will be administrative liability. So baka pabayarin sila ng fine and then be required to comply with the code, but that does not mean na illegal na yung structure nila per se, no. Baka pwede pang pwede pa siyang ayusin. So I would still encourage yung po natin, yung mga audience na nakikinig na even if they have not followed the procedure before, no, it's not too late, no. Meron naman po tayong chance to rectify yung po natin without necessarily demolishing everything. Hindi naman po lahat ng remedy sa building code is demolition, no, or demolition and renovation. Yung mga ganong klaseng mga activities. Baka pag-inspect ng ating building official, maayos naman po yung building, hindi lang nasunod yung pag-apply ng permit. There's still a chance to what you call that, to rectify yung lack of permit, yung lack of certificate of occupancy.
Okay, so there you have it. Nasabi rin po ni attorney sa atin po sakaling hindi po kasi may mga cases talaga siguro na hindi na comply yung paghingi ng permits, maaari pa rin naman po itong ipasuri sa building officials at para sa karampatang pag-rectify ng ating kumbaga errors or nakalimutan na step. Actually, attorney, may I have a question din. What
Yes.
can maybe our local government units, let's say sa level ng barangay, para mas matulungan po tayo na mas marami ang sumunod? Kasi there are really far-flung places, and sabi nga po nung isang resource person natin before, there are many communities that have lack of information, lack of access to information like this. What do you think local governments and maybe community leaders can do para naman po matulungan tayo na masunod or sumunod ang mas marami sa building code?
Right. To be honest, no, it's just my opinion, no, kasi sa totoo lang naman, yung ano po natin, yung mga local governments naman po natin, they're very dynamic, no, and so far in the, as far as I know, no, I've visited a lot of local government units. They're actually doing their part naman po to disseminate information. Yun lang nga lang yung ano po natin, yung sa, it's not a something that that everybody does, no, yung ano yung pag-apply ng building permit. Yun lang nagpapagawa ng ano ng mga bahay. So suddenly they're confronted with the possibility na may kailangan pa palang gawin, no. And in our far flung, to be honest, no, yung mga far flung, I visited some of these barangays, no, na ano na yung nakagawian nila, no, before this building code took effect. Ano po siya, no, gumagawa na po sila ng bahay before this building code took effect. Syempre wala pa yung systematic na requirement of building permits, no, for all kinds of construction, no. So yung nakasanayan nila before, yung predecessors sila gumagawa ng bahay, and then they also do the same thing. Wala naman pong inimpose na requirement before, no. So what I think can be done, syempre yung ano po natin, from time to time pumupunta naman po yung mga ano natin, no, yung people from these far-flung barangays to transact business with the government, no, doon sa barangay hall, doon sa city hall, no. So we could have a information campaign doon sa ano po mismo, sa places where they go to do their to interact with the local officials, no. So I think from time to time pumupunta naman sila sa mga barangay halls, municipal halls to do some official business, no. And then if they see there na may proseso, no, yung to encourage them to actually comply, no. So it should have yung citizen charter natin should be informative enough, should catch their attention, no, na ito pala yung proseso kapag nag-a-apply ka ng building, no. So we could have a campaign siguro to inform these people, no, like posters na asking them if they know na ano ang tawag doon, na kailangan pala ng permit kung kung mag-erect ka ng building, no, except under these circumstances. If it's economic socialized housing, there might be less stringent yung proseso, so mas mabilis. And then if it's traditional indigenous family dwelling, which I think is medyo mahirap nang tingnan ngayon because of the price requirement, yung ano po, yung 15,000 yung amount na covered, no. So if we have this information campaign, no, yung ano lang, yung ano, instead na i-seek natin sila house to house to try to impose this requirement on them, yung ano po natin, yung at the barangay level, no, when they go to these barangays, and then they will see there in the yung in an attention catching way, yung nakalagay na mga information na kailangan palang building permit, certificate of occupancy, they can obtain a lot of information from that one. Yung ano naman po at the city level, no, city level, alam ko po yung inspectors from the local government, no, in trying to enforce this building code and the local ordinances po, pumupunta, nag-iikot naman po yan sila diyan sa mga areas na yan, and then they're looking if naka-record ba to, no. So that's in most cases the reason why we know na wala pala tong building permit, kasi ini-inspect po yung mga buildings, no. And they can continue to do that, but maybe in a more often siguro, no, in a bigger scale siguro, to ensure na yung mga buildings talaga natin covered po yan ng building permit requirements. And in so doing, makikita po natin kung may deficiencies ba yan structurally that will be that will be the cause later on of failure kapag magkaroon ng earthquake, no. So try to help out uh, our our countrymen din, no, yung by being more accessible. That's I think is the key here to disseminate this information on a broader scale.
Okay, maraming salamat po, Attorney John Alexander Belderol. And I think that's the last question for today. Maraming salamat sa ating mga resource persons for Gamely and competently providing answers, to the questions from our participants. Thank you sa mga participants natin sa pagtatanong ng mga inyong clarifications doon sa mga naging topics for today. Partner, ready na ba tayo para sa susunod nating gagawin?
Yes, partner. So before we proceed to our closing, uh, I think it's a partner. It's just appropriate to give appreciation to our resource speakers from day one up to this day, who played a very important role, which is to impart knowledge and awareness to our participants in this learning event. So allow me to read the citation. A certificate of appreciation is hereby presented to for his invaluable support and contribution as a resource person during the earthquake safety information dissemination, an online learning event of Project Shake, supporting households and local government units awareness and knowledge for earthquake preparedness, given this 22nd day of June 2021. And so this certificate of appreciation is hereby presented to Engineer Jeffrey S. Perez, with the topic Understanding Earthquake and its Impacts and Non-Structural Mitigating Measures. And of course, same certificate is presented to Engineer Angelito Angel Lanuza on his topic How to Use How Safe is My House tool. To continue,
The
partner.
The same certificate will be given to our resource persons for day two. One is for our resource person on strengthening of houses made of CHB, Engineer Rani Ison, Ronaldo Ison, and Engineer Ariel Sadural for the topic strengthening of houses constructed with other materials. The same certificate will also be given to our resource persons from the Miyamoto International, Dr. Kit Miyamoto, Elizabeth Peteo, and Miss Jeannie Agrawal for the topic structure strengthening strategies from other countries. To continue,
And
partner?
And of course, a certificate of appreciation is presented to our day three speakers, Engineer Angelito Lanusa, on his topic, Building Typology in the Philippines and the Respective Earthquake Vulnerability Curves. And our last but not the least, Attorney Jean Alexander Belderol on his topic Philippine Building Code and Building Audit Guidelines for Local Government Units. And of course, we would like to show our gratitude to our partner agency, the DOST FIVOX, to Dr. Teresito Bacolco. Thank you very much. Yes, partner?
I think we have come to the last part of our activity where we will be given a closing message from our partner from the DOST Feebox. Partner, would you please introduce our panauhing pandangal na magbibigay ng ating closing message for today?
Yes, partner, I would love to. So to close the event for today, I will introduce to you a geologist who actively worked on GPS data to investigate active crustal deformation in the Philippines. An expert on geophysics, GPS geodesy, he has been with FIBOC since 1997. He has bachelor's degree of geology from the University of the Philippines, Diliman, obtained his PhD from the University Paris at Marie Curie University in Paris, France, graduated at the Development Academy of Philippines for Development Management. Ladies and gentlemen, the DOST FIBOX Deputy Director, Dr. Teresito C. Bacolco. Good morning, sir.
Good morning. Okay, thank you very much. And may I take this opportunity to thank you all for attending this last leg of this series of webinars under the Shake project organized by the Catholic Relief Services in partnership with Caritas Pasig, CSA Malolos, USAID, and FIVOX. As I mentioned during the first webinar, projects like these are very laudable and we should have more of these types of webinars. Thank you, CRS. Kahit nasa pandemic po tayo, kailangan pa rin natin maghanda upang maibsan o di kaya maiwasan ang pinsala dulot ng paglindol dahil wala pong pinipili ang sakuna. Dahil ito ang realidad na kailangan natin tanggapin. Nasa Pacific Ring of Fire tayo. Every now and then, makakaranas tayo ng malalakas na pagsabog ng bulkan o di kaya malalakas na lindol. But just But just because earthquakes are unavoidable, it does not mean that there's nothing we can do to lessen or even remove the impacts of these hazards. There are things that we can do, referred to as controllable factors, that Attorney Bilderol of DPWH mentioned earlier. During earthquakes, most of the damage is due to structural collapse because of intense ground shaking. You already know that. Fortunately, damage from this type of earthquake hazard can be modeled, just like what Engineer Lanusa of FIVOX presented earlier. Also, structural engineers can estimate the peak ground acceleration and can come up with appropriate structural design models to reduce the risk of building collapse. At katulad ng sinabi ni Attorney Bilderol kanina, kailangan natin sundin ang ating National Building Code sa pag-design ng ating structures para hindi lamang ma-minimize ang risk of building collapse, maiiwasan din nating magalit ang ating mga kapitbahay. Kaya kami naman sa FIVOX ay patuloy sa pag-innovate at sa paggamit ng makabagong teknolohiya para ma-minimize ang pinsala dulot ng lindol. Kaya inaanyayahan ko kayo sa July 16, next month will be the anniversary of the July 16, 1990 earthquake. And we will launch How Safe is My House mobile application para madali ninyong ma-assess kung structurally sound ba ang inyong tinitirhan. We'll also launch on the same day 3D Philippines in partnership with DPWH and LaSalle University to systematize surface and subsurface information which engineers can use in their geotechnical studies. Ulitin ko lang na ang lindol mismo ay hindi nakakapatay ng tao. It's the collapse of walls, buildings, and other man-made structures that mostly claim lives. We should therefore make sure that we are staying in a structurally sound house or building. Maraming salamat sa inyong pagdalo.
Thank you very much, Director Teresito Bacolcol, for the closing message. Sa ngayon po ay we have come to the point that our third day of our webinar series has just ended. Partner, ano po ang gagawin ng ating mga participants who will be requesting certificates of participation? May mga announcements ba tayo?
Partner, so that concludes our open forum and the second series of our learning event. So again, thank you very much for your participation, for all who are here in Zoom and for those who are watching us live on YouTube. Thank you very much again, Dr. Bacolco, for that very, very enticing closing remarks. And muli, amin pong pinapaalala sa lahat na if you have questions or clarifications, if you have mga katanungan na gusto po natin i-clarify regarding sa topics ng ating mga resource speakers na hindi po nasagot kanina sa open forum, pwede po kayong mag-iwan ng inyong mga komento sa ating FB page and we will try to answer those queries. Susubukan pong sagutin ng aming team ang inyong mga karagdagang tanong sa abot ng aming makakaya. For our audiences and participants na nangangailangan ng Certificate of Attendance, pakiclick lang po yung link na nasa chat box and also provided in the YouTube comment section. It would also be a great help for us if you could provide your feedback and evaluation to this event. Please click the link in the chat box for your evaluation. And also please share your thoughts on the value and relevance of this Zoom conference and the overall facilitation of this event. You may also provide us with suggestions or even topics that you are interested in relation to earthquake safety. Yes, partner?
Mukhang at this point, kailangan na din po nating magpasalamat sa ating mga participants, yung mga kaklase natin since day one from our national government agencies, DPWH Region 12, DPWH Manila, ang mga local government agencies at ang DILG, Las Piñas, DepEd Muntinlupa, DSWD, DENR, MGB, the Office of the Civil Defense, the BJMP, Department of Agrarian Reform, Jose Reyes Medical Memorial Center, mga local government units ng Project Shake, the City of Manila, City of Pasig, LGU Pateros, LGU Caloocan, San Jose del Monte, Ormoc City, San Pedro, Muntinlupa City, Iloilo, Carlota, in Negros Occidental, Bautista in Pangasinan, Talakag, Bukidnon, Olongapo City, Governor Generoso in Davao Oriental, Labrador, in Pangasinan, Makati, Marawi, Navotas, Malabon, Valenzuela, and Marilao, and Ubando. Of course, may Kawayan. We also have our LGUs from the Rizal Province, Taytay, Cainta, Angono, Rodriguez. Also, our LGU of Taguig and the province of Bulacan. Mayroon din po tayong participants from the Academe, the New Era University, University of the Philippines School of Urban Planning, Urban and Regional Planning, UP Baguio, Adamson University, Western Philippines University, Negros Oriental State University, University of Perpetual Help System Delta, Teach for the Philippines, Mapua University, and Silliman University. Let us not forget our business sector partners and private sectors as well as civil society organizations. RICAFI, Dole Philippines, Association of Structural Engineers of the Philippines, Geological Society of the Philippines, SW PACRIM, Society of University of Southeastern Philippines, Geologists, Resorts World Manila, PNOC Exploration Corporation, and of course, our colleagues from the Catholic Relief Services offices all over the country. So,
Yes, thank you so much to each and every one of you who participated in this learning event. And congratulations to everyone for completing the whole series. And thank you also for the ones who have selected a particular session. Thank you very much and see you on CRS Learning event. This has been your hosts. I am Raj.
and I am Mariel Wong.
Saying thank
Nagsasabi,
you all and
thank
have
you.
a safe day, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Happy lunchtime. See you in our next webinar series.
Ang Pilipinas ay naririto sa hugis akong lugar sa dagat Pasipiko. Daang-daang bulkan at islang naririto, Pacific Ring of Fire ang tawag dito. Ang lindol dito ay karaniwan, ito'y bahagi ng buhay ng bulkan. Sa taga-Pacific Ring of Fire, don't ever think that we're gonna die. Palaganapin ang information, evacuation plan ang aksyon. Sa taga-Pacific Ring of Fire, don't ever think that we're gonna die. Lindol ay natural, kaya ang drills dapat kasanayan. Sa taga-Pacific Ring of Fire, don't ever think that we're gonna die. Tayong lahat ay magkaagapay, tayo ng maganda't magsanay. Sa taga-Pacific Ring of Fire, don't ever think that we're gonna die. Palaganapin ang information.